Dawn's back in the corner.
It's March 11th, 2025. I'd like to call this special study session of the Folsom Cordova Unified School District to order. Superintendent, if you can call roll, please.
Yes, sir. Miss George, Mr. Merrill, Miss Larrett.
Here.
Miss Lofthouse.
Here.
Mr. Reed.
Here.
Mr. Charlam Sherla.
Here.
Mr. Clark.
Here.
All trustees are present. Our student board members are excused for tonight and are absent.
All right, thank you, sir. We will do the land acknowledgement. Okay, it's not here.
As the Folsom Cordova Unified School District, we acknowledge that our administrative facilities and schools occupy the unceded territory of the Nisenan and Miwok, the original people of the skies, land, and waters where we work and learn.
We also recognize the presence and ancestral stewardship of the Nishanan ancestral tribes, the Esto, Natamuse, the Nisim Pawanan to the north, and the Miwok ancestral tribes, and the Amachumne, Consumne, Hopumne, and Makumne to the south along the Great South Sacramento River systems since time immemorial.
We understand that this land upon which our institutions are built was once flourishing with natural resources sustained by the ancestral knowledge and practices of the indigenous communities.
We acknowledge the injustices of colonialism and attempted genocide that have impacted these communities and recognize the resilience of their descendants who continue to thrive today.
In our daily endeavors of the teaching, learning, leadership, and community engagement, we continue to supporting, respecting, and honoring their culture, traditions, and lifeways.
We pledge to work together for the evolving vision of the Miwok and Nishanan, especially all future generations.
Right, thank you. If you can stand with me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A broadcast and recording is being made at the direction of the board, and the broadcast may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. Folsom Cordova Unified District Board Policy 1313 promotes mutual respect, civility, and orderly conduct among employees, parents, and the public. We will treat staff, parents, and members of the public with respect and expect the same in return. If any member of the public uses obscenities or communicates in a demeaning, loud, insulting, and/or demeaning manner, the board will calmly and politely admonish the person to communicate civilly. Public comments during board meetings are an important component of public engagement, transparency. Members of the public will not be permitted to yield their speaking time to another member of the public. And there were no public comments received today. Per the Brown Act, the board is not allowed to enter into a two-way discussion on any matter not on the agenda. With that, I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Moved by Board Member Lofthouse, second by Board Member Charlam Sherla. Superintendent?
Yes, sir. Miss Larrett.
Aye.
Miss Lofthouse.
Aye.
Mr. Reed.
Aye.
Mr. Charlam Sherla.
Aye.
Mr. Clark.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right, well, let's get this started. We'll start our discussion on the Folsom Cordova Unified School District Board Study Sessions on Facilities Measure R and S.
Yes, thank you, sir. Before Sean gets started, I just wanted to first take another moment to say thank you to the citizens of Rancho Cordova for their supports of RNS. I mean, I feel incredibly honored to spend this evening with you having this conversation, but we wouldn't be having it without their continued support of our students, their children, and grandchildren as we do our best in making sure to provide up-to-date facilities for them to live, learn, and thrive in. So just want to say that. Thank you. Sean, are you going to be presenting from there? It's totally up to you because 3 hours there might get a little tired.
Yeah, I was going to do it from here.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And so this evening we have a presentation that was put together by the team where we're really going to just dive into project scopes and details with regards to R and S. So we're going to pop that open now, if I may, please. All right. And so tonight, we're going to spend the next couple hours together talking about RNS. That's our sole focus here this evening. So we're going to just talk about where we are in process to date and how we've gotten to where we are. Then we're going to talk about just some of the due diligence and work that we're working on. And we'll dive into the housing. You can see there are some projects that we're going to be starting off with. And then the large first phase projects, timeline, the bid processes or project process that we're going to look at, and then some budget pieces. And so, of course, this is just a study session, so we'll just have a back and forth as we go along. We have the facility team members here, also in the back, some of our maintenance leadership, and so we have everybody here hopefully to be able to answer any questions you may have. And so please do stop us along the way. And so what we wanted to start off with is just give you just a kind of a high-level kind of overview of what we've been to date. If you remember, we have presented to the board, there were some very, very preliminary drawings that we provided to the board of kind of conceptual ideas of what we could do with some of the modernization work with the RNS dollars. Those original designs, we have to remember though, did not have a budget allocation to them. They were just conceptual with the architects with the idea of trying to look at our existing facilities and what we could potentially do to get them up to the kind of the same educational standards as our newest schools, with some of the design features as well and some of those pieces. And so from that, we've then, now that we know our dollar amounts, $144 million for R and S each, along with kind of what our priorities where scopes are, we're really starting to now dive in site by site. And so this is going to be where we're actually looking at individual sites and the projects and processes that we're going to be doing. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about some what we call kind of shovel-ready or early phase projects, some smaller activities that every campus will immediately get. Because remember, on a project of the size of this nature, we're actually looking at 3 issuances of the funds. And so, some sites may not see significant changes to their campuses for up to like maybe 6 years. And so we just want to make sure that every campus gets something right out the gate on areas that we know are a priority. And so we'll talk about that as well. All right. And before we dive into it, Eric did speak to the community of Rancho Cordova, and we do want to recognize that, the community has supported Folsom Cordova, and so we want to make sure that we are good stewards of taxpayer money and that we're doing things efficiently, effectively, and for the best outcomes of students. And so we just wanted to talk about some of the things that we're doing with regards to that. The schools, as you know, are older. So we have some schools that are in excess of 60 years. And so there are different needs. Every school has a little different design to it, a little different need based off of the programs that are on those campuses. And so it's not as though we can just cookie cutter and go in and spend the same amount at every school site and do the exact same thing, and they'll look the same and have the same activities or services. But what we're trying to do is take a unique approach, meeting with all of the campuses. We've met with stakeholders on those sites to talk about what are their priorities, what are their wants and needs, and identify those along with the structural things that are necessary, the backbone, core systems, roofs, other activities, things that we also need to make sure we keep in mind when we're doing these modernizations of these campuses. And so we have to balance that, the needs versus the wants, right? The other big thing that we want to do is some schools have different programs. We have some schools that do STEM, right, or STEAM, and we also have IB programs at some of our schools. And so we want to make sure that some of those unique programs, the facilities accommodate that, but also keeping in mind that programs change over time. So we want to be flexible in the spaces that we use that so that they can be used for other purposes. I know in my old high school, there was a home ec room that was used as a Spanish room, right? And so none of the home ec equipment ever got used, and all of the sinks and everything else that came with it. So we want to make sure that if we do put systems in, that they can be changed to modernize with the updated needs of our campuses. And that's something we're looking at as well. We also want to make sure that, and I know some of the board members brought this up, we don't want to go in and do something and then have to tear it out in a few years and we'll have to replace it. And so we want to be very careful in our design work that we make sure that as we look at projects and scopes, if we have a phase 1, phase 2, that we're not tearing out something we just put in a short time frame, right? We want to be very conscious of that as well. We also want to coordinate with other projects we have. Mr. Bonovich is here, and so his maintenance team does a lot of work during the summer and throughout the year, but they do a lot of projects during the summer, and so we want to make sure we coordinate and maximize effort and return on dollar. If he's going to be doing roofs or gutters, we want to then make sure that if we're doing facade work or other activities, that we coordinate that work. And so we've been working through all of our departments together to make sure we maximize and get the best bang for our buck. And then also, we know that with these projects, some of them are going to take many, like we said, some of the projects may not be started until 6 years from now. And so with that, what can we do in the meantime to still make sure that those campuses are being maintained and kept up to date? So another big area that we're focusing on is the value engineering. The board has specifically requested that we have a third-party value engineer. We do have that in plans as well, but I will share that we are also value engineering throughout the project. So anytime you have a scope or project and you start looking at options, there are a lot of different options. Do we tear down the building? Do we add on to the building? Do we remodel the building? Do we change one building from a classroom into the administrative building? Do we move the kindergarten wing and then therefore have to move the playground areas? And so those are all the things we're trying to go in and consider in each of the buildings. Are the buildings sound enough that we feel like they have good, I think the term I've been heard is bones. Do they have good bones? And can we just repurpose that building? Or I think Bonovich said the term dog, it's a dog, we should just get rid of it, those types of things, right? So those are the kind of the things we're doing as a team through these processes, trying to really know the buildings that are trying to maximize our return with the money that we're spending, right? And that's value engineering as well. But on top of that, when we get to the schematic design phase, we will bring in a third-party engineer who will be looking at that. Also, we're looking at cost-effective ways to do the project. So we're going to talk a little bit about our delivery method, which, leaseback is a method that the district has used for many years. And what that allows us to do is bring in a contractor earlier in the process, because as you may or may not know, architects like to design a certain way. They like to win awards and they like to make things look beautiful. No offense to architects, but at the same time, we have to live within a budget. We have to make sure that we get all of the different areas and all the scopes that are necessary. And so we have to balance all of those things. And so often bringing in a contractor, as well as our team involved throughout the process, they can look at opportunities to be more efficient. One of the biggest ones that we've talked about is, as we do these modernizations, we should have standardized window sizes. Very simple idea, but that's not what we have across our district. So when we need to replace a window, we can go to Home Depot and get a window and replace it if we had to, or order the window where we don't have to get a specialty window that is 4 inches or 6. It can be just a little bit off, but it makes a big difference in time and cost for the district. And so that's long-term decision-making, right? That's for the long term to make sure when we have to modernize and do future needs, we're in a process, in a place that we have standards. And so those are the things that we're looking at as well. And so those are kind of some of the things that we're doing through our due diligence process as we go along through this. And so we just wanted to share that. Again, as a taxpayer, as somebody within the community, they want to know that the dollars that they've approved that they're going to be paying for the next 30 years is going towards the place where it needs to be, which is trying to maximize the activities and programs for kids, right, and the facilities. So, all right.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
And I looked at the slides, and I don't think you addressed it, so I might as well just ask the question up front. So when a new facility ages, in the 25th year, I believe, we get money from the state for modernization. Is that correct?
20th for a new construction, 20th for a stick-built, 25 for a portable. Isn't that right? Yes. So after 20 years, we get modern. Other way around. 20 for portables, 25 for stick-built.
We're eligible for modernization.
Eligible. Yeah. So what happens when a facility turns 50? So is it every 20, or let's assume it's not a portable. Let's assume it's a constructed facility. So it's 25 years that we are eligible for state modernization money. Does that mean that the next time that facility would be eligible would be at its 50th anniversary?
Well, it depends on when you last did. I mean, because if you did it in modernization, say it was 30 or 35 years, it wouldn't be at 50. It'd be another 25 years after that point. It would become eligible again.
25 years after the last time you applied for funds. So if you do it exactly on 25 years, then it would be another 25 years. But if you waited till 27 years, you'd have to wait 25 years after the 20.
A lot of these projects, we have used some eligibility. We have more eligibility now because time has passed. So it varies. It could be by building because some buildings are built different times, all sites. So we're always actively seeking how much eligibility we can get from each building, each site, depending on how much eligibility we have based on when it was used before in the state program.
Okay, I was curious how that worked. Thank you.
Sean, I have one quick question.
Sure.
On the first section, second bullet, balancing needs versus wants. I know you said we met with the stakeholders and we have a good assessment for certain sites. So can you define the stakeholders and what role the residents are playing or the
Yeah, can you talk about
parents?
the FIT meetings?
Yes, we've had a lot of facility improvement plan meetings. We've had several. We've brought actually to each site has its own committee. We've brought to all of the stakeholders within the site. We've had a community. We're going to have a community meeting on down the line once we have a future. And we had an original meeting. Remind me of the meeting we had early on to try to get involved.
Yeah, so the other process that's going on simultaneously right now is the district-wide facilities comprehensive plan. So there are community forums that are going to be a part of that process, and instead of trying to do them both, they're being blended together. So the meetings that we've had to date are at the site, and the administrators there have invited staff and parents to attend. Each site has a different composition based on, the willingness to participate. And then we've taken that information and blended it and coordinated it with what we're trying to move forward with. And then that information will then be shared at the community forums. And I don't know if they've been scheduled yet.
A lot of those have been scheduled.
Yeah, I think they're within the next month.
And the facility improvement meetings at each site, parents have been involved with those as well. They've invited parents. Actually, Amy invited her entire staff to the meeting and got a lot of people. So we're getting a lot of people involved in the process.
Yeah. So, but we haven't finalized that list of needs or wants. Where are we at this point? For example, I know you're going to go through that later on. I think
if we
down
go
the
through it,
road.
then that probably might help answer some of the questions.
Yeah, good. And since this slide is talking about the due diligence, and we all know what happened to the Measure M, $750 million, that expensive two buildings out on the south of 50. What are our lessons learned from those? How are we applying, especially on the third section, value engineering?
Yeah, well, a couple of things I would say with the design work on those campuses. At the time that the design was first happening, specifically with Mangini, we were still within budget, meaning we could still meet the needs. The escalation that has occurred in the last, 5-6 years has more or less doubled the cost for a lot of the work that we're doing with design. So we're obviously having to reduce design significantly to try to keep up with the escalation of cost. I would also share, anytime you build a new school from a new design, you continue to do modifications to it. You continue to find where there are areas of cost savings, and then we did create quite a bit of cost savings between Mangini and Alder Creek. All of that cost savings was eaten up by escalation of construction cost. And so, you didn't see it in actual dollars, but actual project scope-wise, we did cut quite a bit out of it with metal. I forget how much in sheet metal. Why don't you talk?
We saved a lot. We straightened out the roofs. We saved, I don't know how many tons of steel out of the project. We cut the bridge out of it. We softened up some lines, some material products. It was up to $3-4 million worth of VE that we saved out of from Mangini to Alder Creek. As we also added square footage. So we added square footage because of the addition of all-day K and TK. So, the resulting cost was more because we had escalation, like Sean was saying, double-digit escalation, added square footage. But the net was we actually saved on what it would have been probably by, $3 or $4 million, I would guess.
So the other thing is there's always things we learn from everything, but new design's a little different than modernization. As I was sharing before, modernization is unique to that campus. And so there are differences in every school, just the materials that were originally used, the size of the original buildings. And so every campus is unique in that. But efficiency-wise, what we're trying to do is maximize the work completed, right, to give us a campus that meets all of the educational needs that we believe the students need for the future. And that's the core goal of everything we're doing, right? And so that would be what I would speak to on these modernization projects.
Okay, and my last question is about the architect or the designer, that group. Are we using the same architect, what we use for this building, Manjini Ranch and Elder Creek? Is this the same group of architects we are using for future on R&S?
We went out with an RFP, and we have a whole new pool of architects.
Oh.
We have actually 5 new architects, and all of them are working on various projects. Right now, we have 4 different architects working on multiple different schools within that, the FIFs down there. So they're all based on qualifications, experience, went through an interview process, and we're working with several different ones.
So we already have those pool of architects selected, and some of them may be working based on the site.
So the
Project.
designs, yeah, the projects, in the packages, we actually have multiple firms working through all of these sites. And so the reason why we did that was to see how each firm would take on the request we had, which was initially it was doing the design, modernizing the campus to meet the educational standards we have for our current day educational standards. And what we saw was some did it through different modernization processes than others. Some were tearing down, some wanted to build up, some wanted to, and so we looked at that and we identified which ones work best for what we're looking for. And we can steal some things from one firm, we select a methodology for another firm. So that's part of what our process has been as well.
God, thank you.
You're welcome.
I know, Chan, you mentioned already, architects, they want the state of the art, exceptional designs. We want it as well for Rancho Cordova schools, but cost is a base as well, how we can support all those dollars.
And they're good team players in that. I don't want to throw them all under the bus, but I do want to recognize that they have a role to play,
Yep.
but also through the value engineering process, through bringing in contractors to support us, through our own internal team, we all balance each other out. Right.
Okay.
We all want the best thing for kids, but we also
Yep.
have to recognize they have different endpoints than we do. So we have to make sure we meet where we need to.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sean, I did have a question.
Sure.
And we're speaking upon stewardship and us being good stewards. I'm actually thinking about community involvement. And the one thing I didn't see is an oversight committee for Measure R and S. Are we going to have that
Required.
oversight for R, oversight for S? Are we going to combine them? How is that going to look? Because I would really like them to have a little input on this moving forward.
So the way the oversight committee actually works is they're actually not part of the design
Okay.
component. The oversight committee's responsibility is to ensure, and they're normally generated once dollars have been issued.
Got it.
And their responsibility is to make sure that the dollars spent meet the requirements of how the bond proceeds were identified in our ballot language. So they have a little different responsibility and role. Now, we have, honestly, we normally have trouble getting people on the oversight committee, so we would love to get more people. We may look at combining the RNS, but normally you would have a committee for each of the bond measures. You can combine them potentially as one oversight committee, because you have to have very specific representatives. You have to have a parent representative.
Sure.
You have to have somebody from the business community. You have to have somebody from the taxpayer association. So it's very, very prescribed on that process. But I will tell you right now, we've had pretty good turnout on a lot of our site meetings. And so hopefully some of those people who have been involved in the initial conversations will be on the committee as well. That would be our goal.
Okay, thank you. And
You're
then
welcome.
moving forward, I haven't received the notification on the meetings. Maybe I overlooked them, but is it possible to kind of let the board know when those?
The FIP meetings?
Yeah.
Sure, we can make a note to include the board and invite on those.
Sure, thank you.
We've already had quite a few, but we can continue to, as we
Okay.
continue to have them.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.
Just a tip. I'm sorry. I think the next slides will go faster. So, that way we are asking all the questions here.
It's your 3 hours.
And Well, last one was 10:30, so we are good.
No, we're not doing 10:30, but yeah.
Especially the stakeholders, just a suggestion. Chris, I think you're 100% right that oversight committee rolling that into the stakeholder, that way they understand the needs and wants, and when everything is rolling, at least they know this where it started as well. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
You got it?
I
All
just
right.
have sort of a comment.
Okay.
Because I think that you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen. And I think that when we move forward and looking at like what we're doing in a school, we have to recognize the people that are going to be the experts in terms of what a school needs is not necessarily the parents or not necessarily a business community member, but our teachers and our educators and our instructional assistants and our principals, the ones that have boots on the ground in the classroom, that are using the classroom for their workspace and to be able to provide education for our kids. We have to be very careful about whose voice we're hearing about what these needs are, because I think that that's where our priority needs to go, is the needs to be able to upgrade these schools, to be able to provide the best education for them now and in the future. And the people who are going to know that are the ones that use it for that purpose. And the wants are going to possibly come from people that don't use it day in and day out as a workplace and with kids, and not just walking through the hallways and dropping off kids. So I think we have to be very careful about where and who we're including in those conversations. And so I worked at the district when we were doing the planning for Mangini, which then rolled over into Alder Creek because it was very similar. But the voices that were in that room, we had hours upon hours upon hours of meetings about really getting it right for use for the students. And so I think we have to just keep in mind who knows what is best use for a school, and the purpose of a school and educating our kids are the people that are there all the time. And so making sure that we elevate those voices. I'm not saying eliminate the voices of others, but making sure that we focus really on who is using these to provide an education for our kids. So more a thought, not a question. But.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I know that like a lot of those meetings that they are having, like a good amount of like the community schools, which I think are representative of the community itself because they are working with the parents and things like that. So, and I think registrars, a lot of the, especially at the elementary level, a lot of the people who are working also have kids that are in the district and oftentimes in that school as well. So there is, I think, a pretty good representation of parents' voice and from that perspective as well. And the feedback we've gotten since David and I are on the facilities committee is in those planning meetings, it has been like a really robust cross-section of staff in the spaces that are giving like really good feedback, from site to site. Like some of them need laundry services. So I think that by the time we kind of get through everything, and especially with the comprehensive plan, we'll have a pretty good cross-section of folks pushing into the conversation, so.
We're going to talk a lot, apparently. Actually, I think I agree with like 98% with what Kara indicated. Absolutely, we need to, listen to the teachers and the administrators and the people who are on site. Although the one caveat that I have is the glass sliding doors at Mangini and Alder Creek was not a request from the parents. It was a request from the teaching community that are not using it. So again, beware of shiny, bright things that glitter, because sometimes people want the shiny bells and whistles. And on hindsight, after it's put in, they're like, well, we didn't really need it anyway, but it was cool. And I think we've learned our lesson, I hope, from Mangini and Alder Creek, that we're going to avoid these shiny, bright, nice little bells and whistles that sometimes teachers and administrators want. But generally speaking, I agree with what Kara said.
Yeah, there's no glass doors on any of the RNS projects.
Glass walls.
Glass walls. All right, and just so you guys know, in the April 10th regular board meeting, we're actually going to be talking about the new design of the next new school. So we just wanted to spend a minute talking about temporary housing. It's been a little while since we've had to have this discussion in Folsom, Cordova, but this is a piece that we're looking at where if you're doing a kind of a large project on a campus, you have to find housing for the students for the classrooms you're either replacing or working on. And so as you can see here, we have temporary housing needs at probably both Cordova High and Cordova Villa, which are two of our first projects. We're talking about options on that. With regards to Villa specifically, there's quite a bit of wing, that more or less what we call the spaceship, which I believe is like 7 classrooms, 10 classrooms, sorry, 10 classrooms. That building will be no longer in existence. And so when that occurs, that's quite a bit of number of classrooms we have to figure out where to house those students. And so when you do something like that, we have some options we wanted to share. We can rent portables. That's the most cost ineffective means. You rent it and return it back, and it's costly. Move it in, put the utilities to it, and then you have nothing at the end of the day. Purchasing of portables, there can be some benefit to that if you have purposes for those portables later on, and you could repurpose them. But one of the options that we'll be talking about as we go further along, again, this is a 26, 27 conversation, but we'll be talking is potentially during construction, housing students on another site, which we have done before. And that may be something, that's the most cost-effective method, as long as we can provide transportation and some of the other activities. But that may be a way to create savings versus purchases of portables or rental. So just sharing that as kind of an overview, that's something we'll be probably looking at as we continue on through the process and having conversations about.
So Sean, you're looking at the same model that we did for Oak Chan?
Was it Oak Chan or Folsom Hills?
Folsom Hills.
It was Folsom Hills.
Folsom Hills.
Oak
Right.
Chan actually had leased portables and a couple of permanent, as well as Sundal, but then Folsom Hills
Your
was
Folsom
actually-
Hills, actually, okay, it was
Split
Folsom
between
Hills.
2 sites, actually, yeah.
Right, okay. So it would probably be something like that?
Yeah, something similar. I think we can consolidate it to a couple of grade levels at one site, that might have to go to one site for a year or something of that nature, but, and that's just very high level conversation at this point, but just wanted to, the savings is in the millions of dollars, right? Several $1 million by doing that versus purchase of portables and some of those other things. And so there's opportunities there. Again, we already know the project scope we have is greater than the bond proceeds we will receive from the community. And so we're looking for every opportunity to save where we can.
And we are looking at different modes of transportation to make sure that we get those kids.
Of course,
there
yeah, we'll work
because-
out all those details because you have
Okay.
administrative support. You have to figure out, how the special eds, how the kids will get back and forth, all of those things. So we'd figure all that out.
Great, thank you, sir.
I'd imagine that rebalancing Mather Heights and Navigator is probably good at this point, especially if Navigator's proximity to Cordova Villa.
Yeah, the rebalance of those two, it'll take a few years before Mather Heights really has enough kids that they'll see an adjustment. So Mather Heights honestly is probably the best location for temporary housing if we were to pick one site. And so it's a little further, but it would be able to house all the classrooms that we maybe need to move if necessary. So all right. So continuing on. So just, these are what you would call early projects or shovel-ready projects. We really wanted to make sure that every campus got something right off the bat, to make sure that they all felt the benefit of the Measure R&S funding, right? And so that every site felt something within their community. And so what you can see here are some of the projects that we're focused on at the elementary level, kind of 2 things. One is playground equipment, trying to upgrade with some age-appropriate equipment. So a lot of our equipment is for 5 years old and up. And now with TK and some of those things, those kids are 4. Some can even be as young as 3 for a few months before they turn 4. And so we want to make sure, also we're looking at being ADA compliant with all of our playground equipment, so all of our students have access to it. And so that's something that we're looking at updating at our places. The other one is security fencing. That has been an ongoing conversation. The board is well aware that we did Cordova High, which was a significant project. And so what we're planning to do is the safety team had identified all the sites and the priority of the sites. And so we're planning to hit all of those sites to get the fencing updated as well. We have to be careful with that, obviously. Like we talked about, we don't want to put in a bunch of fencing and have to tear it out with the modernization. So we have to kind of phase that in or plan that out appropriately. Like even at Cordova High, we're just going to have to remove some panels, but we will be able, even with the project, once it's done, we'll be able to put panels back. And so even though we did that work, we'll be able to reuse most of the items for it. So there's minimal loss on that.
Question.
Yeah.
So, and I could be wrong, but I think, for example, in Folsom, some of the fencing, not all the fencing, but some of the fencing came out of the 25-year modernization funds. Folsom High, I think Natoma Station, and Gold Ridge. It did not come out of bond funds. And so I'm kind of curious, are we tracking when state modernization funds will be available for these campuses? And might we be able to use state modernization funds for the fencing or playground equipment and not have to use it for, the 144 million for that. I'm just concerned about public perception that the first thing that we do with 144 million is buy all new playground equipment and fencing, and the public going, I thought we were going to get modern facilities and new buildings, but we're getting playground equipment. That's my concern.
So a couple things. First, the state money is already included in all of this budget. So it's all the same pot for us. I mean, you could say it's the state matching money versus the bond money if you'd like. We're looking at it cumulatively and we're further on when we get to the budget slide, you'll see how much we're getting, I think with $30-something million in state matching money along with the bond proceeds. So it's kind of 6-1 for us because the whole pot is what we're using for the scope of the projects. The truth being told, I would say that some of the sites won't see anything for 4 to 6 years. And so we really believe that these things are priorities at these sites. And honestly, the community, the community at those sites have said these are things, the safety committee has identified it. So there are areas of need. Like, for example, Folsom High, we used bond proceeds to pay for that project. That was, the fence there was part of the bond project. So it's not as though bonds don't pay for the fences, because these are expensive fences, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so that is what we've been paying for most of our fence projects.
Do we know how much of the 144 million, including the modernization funds that come from the state, will be going towards fencing and playground equipment total of all the sites?
We could look up the number for you. So Terry will see if we can find that number for you.
I can't say it's a big priority for the sites, though. I mean, the fencing and playgrounds are
Sure.
a big part, and it's a big need. And if we don't do some of those, especially the playgrounds, then we're going to be spending deferred maintenance dollars and other dollars in order to do that at some point as well. So it is something that is recognized as a safety concern. We work with SIA and playground officials on it to make sure that, the time is right on that.
No, I get it. I mean, when I was a kid, I loved the playground equipment, and I'm sure that hasn't changed with our kids. I just want to make sure that we stretch this as much as possible. That we don't say, oh gosh, we ran out of money, we can't do this enhancement to a building. But I get it. I get the playground equipment's important.
And so at secondary schools, you can see here we're on the S dollars, we're specifically targeting a project at each of the sites. So you can see at Cordova High, the lights in the press box, restrooms at Mills, and fencing at Mitchell. So those are the priorities using some of again, we're doing bigger projects with them, but these are just kind of some of these quick projects you can see happening this summer that will impact these campuses, right? We just wanted to get right in there and show that the community that we're not wasting our time. We want to get in and do some activities to support the school sites.
Yeah. Quickly, Matt, I think 2 meetings ago or so, we approved a procurement for $1.8 million for playground equipment from Tucson, Arizona, Piggyback. Is that the one we are drawing the money from this?
Yes, we did that was for the playgrounds, and there'll be more coming back for the installation of them. We have some, actually, the board meeting coming up next week. There'll be a lot of approvals for fencing projects as well. So you'll see those coming through as we approve the contracts. So we're going out, we're doing RFPs, we're doing proposals for all the different, we're getting competitive bids for all of the different fencing projects. So you'll start seeing those coming in as well.
So in this regard, especially the line item, the first bullet, new playground equipment is exactly the one
Exactly.
we approved recently,
It was,
$1.8
yes.
million. David, if that helps you, the number dollars, $1.8 million, we already approved 2 meetings ago.
But between the primary and secondary schools, between the fencing and the playgrounds, it's about $9 million between playground equipment and fencing for the early.
For
stage.
long term, yeah.
Yeah,
Got it.
and that also includes the Cordova High work as well, the
Got
press
it.
box and the stadium lights. So you're looking about $9 million
Okay.
for the work that's being done this year.
All
Thank
of
you.
those projects, yeah, I highlighted there. You can see here, we're also coordinating some deferred maintenance project work. You can see the roof gutters at Mills. And then we're also working on the gym lobby there and some other activities there. So all of these projects are planned to be finished by 2025. So a lot of these will happen during the summertime as well.
Just really quick on the building for the site ground staff, we're talking about moving them out of the shed that's in the stadium
Yes.
area?
Yes.
Thank you.
I will say that the press box may slip into 26 to accommodate football season and practice. So we haven't ironed out the schedule entirely, but that has to balance.
There's
around.
ADA implications and Division State
We need to have
Architect
the press box
approvals.
for your games, and we need to make sure that we can get it in time. So that may just be a little later.
To be honest with you, the ground site stuff, building is probably a priority, even over the press box.
Yeah, and that'll be going in before the
Great.
summer.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. So this is just kind of a summary of yes, no's, if they're getting fencing at that site or not. You'll notice Villa is at no's across the board for the most part, and RCE, Rancho Cordova Elementary, also has quite a few no's other than one playground. That's because they're part of the first round of design. So they're going to be getting some bigger project work there. And so just wanted to identify that. But that gives you kind of just a checklist of who's getting what.
I have a question
Sure.
on Mather Heights Elementary. There's a huge right-of-way that is owned by the Park District, and if we were to put fencing all around that facility, there's probably going to be more fencing there than maybe we even did at some of the high schools. I mean, that is a major stretch of property. Have we considered discussing with Parks Department about having the fencing go over the right-of-way with a gate and have the fence connect with the adjacent property owner's backyard fencing, and with an agreement that off-school hours, we will prop open the right-of-way fence gate for the path. Because if that would save a tremendous amount of money. But if we're going to put a fence along the pathway out by the fields on Mather Heights, that's going to be incredibly expensive. Has there been any thoughts on
We
that?
have met with him. The problem with that is that there's a path that goes through there
Right.
that comes from the outside, and we're going on this side of it, so we maintain the path because people go through all throughout the day to
Right.
get through there. If we were to close that off, they have no way of getting through that area. And that stretch, because we're not going that whole distance, we're going from the pathway on the one side to where it comes over to where the school is.
Yeah.
So it's just that section there where there's, 10, 12 houses or so, and then we're coming back. But otherwise, you would be cutting off the entire path to get from the park to those houses on the other side. So we've worked with parks to try to minimize it as much as we can and still maintain the right-of-ways and pathways through there.
I mean, it's going to be bizarre. You're going to basically have like an alleyway in effect that will be the path of the Parks Department.
Yeah, it will be. Otherwise, you're cutting off the path.
Well, is it worth just asking the question of the Parks Department and have them tell us no and save?
I believe that we actually had that conversation last year on our 2x2 with them. I think you were at that meeting.
Didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris and I were at that meeting and because there was some discrepancy over the easement that's there and who's kind of responsible for the easement. So we did have a map overlay and we did have a pretty robust conversation about that. And trying to remember, it's been a bit of time, but there has been some initial discussions with them about exactly where that fence placement can go because of that path. So.
And then we're relying on neighbors' fences to be intact. Then they put gates in it, their fence falls down, others get in, dogs. So it's our fence, we maintain it. Then we know there's a safety, it's pure safety, because we have a lot of problem with neighbors' fences in a lot of areas.
Well, and I think at that site, when we actually had that conversation at the 2x2, they were having a lot of problems with dogs and things like that coming onto campus because of the non-fence. And people were very confused about where does the park end and where does the school start. And then the kids were like gaping at people because they were working out with no shirts on. So it was just like, it's a little nuts over there. I mean, there's a great thing about having a park and a school next to each other, but it also does pose those challenges, I think.
There's a trail going on.
We will
behind.
check back in with them, though. We'll just have another conversation.
Yeah, how often are you having these conversations with parks?
All the time. We've had a big conversation with them about Mitchell because they're doing some improvements at Dave Roberts Park. So
Right.
anytime we have a park adjacency, we kind of talk about that. It's really difficult because when you got a park right next to it, but that's where the people can come onto the campus. So you're trying to maintain that safety. So I know Chris, my department's met several times with the Parks Department on coordination of that.
Yeah, I would really like to see us get together and have a 2x2. I don't think there's anything that's been scheduled with the parks yet, and we need to get that on the calendar as soon as we can, especially now that we're doing this. So it gives us an opportunity to have even more of a robust conversation. I know I'm on that committee. Jen and I are on that committee. So if we can try to tie them down and see if we can get a conversation going with them. I mean, I appreciate the fact that you're talking to them, but I mean, if we can get them at the table and just sit down and kind of let them know what we're doing, especially at Mitchell and Mitchell and obviously Mather Heights would be great.
They've approved the plan. I know at Mitchell.
Okay.
But we can have further discussion with them.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right. And so this time, we're going to talk about kind of the project scope of what we're looking at for our first three big projects. And so you can see here, there's Cordova High, RCE, and Villa. And so these are ones where we're actually in design phase. These are projects that will kick off, and occupancy is hopefully by 27 on these. So Matt, you want to walk us through some of these here? Or Terry? Terry was going to walk us through.
Sure. So Sean already alluded to a little bit about what's happening at Villa. The spaceship is, I don't say leftover, but a consequence of the open school concept of the 70s. And so there were no walls originally, and then the walls came, and there were partitions, and then they were created into permanent, and they're trapezoidal classrooms with the library in the middle, and the admin is undersized. And so we've decided that the best solution is to demolish the building and start with fresh. And so what you're looking at are 2 classroom wings to replace the 10 classrooms that were in the building. And then on the south is a cluster where you're going to have the administration, the library, and the additional community school hub spaces. It's not designed yet. It's just basically a form of square footage for those 4 programs. And so being able to create, a different identity to the campus and the frontage and a little courtyard in between the 2 classroom wings. There will be a new playground area. That's keynote number 10. And then what they're showing on the hard court is temporary housing, because at this point we haven't made the decision whether the students are being offloaded or not. And this would be what might happen, like what Oak Chan and Sundal experienced. But we're, again, hoping that that's going to go away if we can offload the students to the other sites. So the high level, that's the big idea for this campus.
So on this one, I know we've got portables on the backside of that one. So are those going away totally then, or?
No,
Is that
we're
gonna be
not
part of the
touching
interim?
any of the portables. at this point. It's just the spaceship.
We've also identified a lot of scope that is unfunded scope too, kind of planning these as saying, okay, some of the priorities, funded scope, and then if we have additional funds, it would be additional things that have been identified that we would do in the future, and some of those would be future portables as well.
Would that come from the district-wide bond?
It could, or whatever funding's available, yeah.
A quick question on the administrative offices and the fencing. Will there be an access to the administrative offices from outside the fence for the parents and an internal entrance for students to the administrative offices that will be on the inside of the fence, and not in such a way that it looks like what we did at Gold Ridge,
That would be the goal, yes.
which looks a little silly.
Well, yeah, because it wasn't conceived of that idea.
Right.
But, so Alder and Mangini obviously have a very different
Right.
concept, but the priorities are the same, is being able to force the public into the administration before going onto campus, and then having a straight access for the students into the admin behind, and I want to say barrier, because it's not necessarily a fence, it could be a wall of a
Yeah.
building or whatever.
Okay,
So yes, absolutely.
all right, perfect, thank you.
When we are talking about moving, students potentially to other schools, other classrooms, I know this school specifically, like the special ed is housed in that building. Are we making sure that our most vulnerable students are able to stay at their school site?
Yes, we
during
actually
these-
just had a
okay.
meeting yesterday
Okay.
about that, and conversations have already occurred with the teachers on that site.
Okay.
Even though this is not until 26, and they spoke to that, they felt like staying on site was what they would prefer to do in their existing locations.
Okay, I just,
Yep.
following our neighborhood school model, I think that we want to, if that's the direction we're continuing, we want to make sure that we
Yep.
follow through on our end.
And just on that note, not even just on the temporary notion, on our first kickoff meeting conversations, with the change and expanding the sped classrooms on each campus, they're taking the opportunity to kind of reorganize where each classroom is once this construction project is done, so that they're better situated for their resources on the campus. So that's definitely going to be a benefit.
In the design work on this one, is there also a spot for the community schools hub to be in the administration building?
Yes. So we had our first hub conversation this last Friday, and there's more like 4 hubs, but so there's the health hub, and then there's the family resources center, and then some additional support student services that may or may not be in the admin. So definitely being accommodated.
Thank you.
Terry, just a process question for me. I'm trying to understand. Is this a proposed by the architect or the planner and has been reviewed by the facilities subcommittee? And please help me.
So this plan was developed in conjunction with the facilities department and educational specification parameters, right? We were looking at where the inadequacies were size-wise, space-wise, to develop which things we were going to target first. There has been at least one presentation to the facilities committee early on about these concepts, and we've spent the rest of the time trying to refine the scope from that high-level idealized, we look at what we could do, to reality. And we're starting to get there where we need to do, again, more conversation, but obviously sharing tonight. We're really focusing on the first 3 projects because now we have a timeline to meet to try and break ground next year. But then the other 10 schools have a little bit more time to refine what that scope is. But they've all been worked on in that capacity.
Got it. Thank you.
I would say from my perspective, what we saw before was kind of like a beautification kind of a situation where we're talking more specifically to ed specs conversation. So I'm actually really happy with where we're at, with talking about what we're doing with the admin building, better classrooms, community school hubs, you know, and so I think we've kind of gotten from that, okay, this is what we could be to conceptualize to like an actual more like, sounds like more of a plan of specifics to that particular site versus just like, here's a new facade kind of a thing, conversation that we were having.
Just a curiosity here, the 10 new classrooms, how come we chose this style versus the style that we used in Folsom, where you would have a 10-room school building with a shared modular, or I don't know what you would call that, a shared space in between the spine of the 5 and 5, where teachers could have breakout groups, a study area, planning time. It doesn't look like these classrooms accommodate any of that. Versus, if you just simply align them and put a shared space in between, we could have a facility that would be identical to what we built at almost all, 10 of the 12 elementary schools in Folsom. Just out of curiosity, why did we choose this?
We started there. And we are peeling back a lot of the scope for budget issues. And so it's an ongoing conversation.
Square footage is where the
All
cost is.
square footage and, yeah,
So these units, are these modular ones?
these are modulars.
These are modulars. We're cutting scope for cost. And so you were talking about a model where that common area would all be extra square footage. And
Correct.
I don't know, what's modular costing us, $700 a square foot?
Yeah, $650.
$650 a square foot, it starts adding up when we start doing these things. And so we're trying to still get to where we're trying to be, but within the scope of what we have. Because as you're going to see when we get the budget, we still have more to cut.
And the challenge with modular is there is no comparable collaboration configuration with that type of construction. Just because it's modular and the components, they don't fit together to create that space. So in order to do a collaboration space similar to what we have in Folsom right now would have to be permanent construction, which then bumps it up to $850, $900 a square foot.
I don't know. I mean, the thing that just troubles me a little is, we just redid Carl Sundell with a bond, with Oak Chan with a bond, Folsom Hills with a bond. And in all three of those sites, we built what I just described. We didn't build this. And we are constantly concerned about Rancho Cordova, rightfully so, looking at Folsom saying, well, how come we didn't get this? Here's an opportunity on this site to give them what Folsom has, and we're not. And I understand the costs. I wish there was some way we could figure out how to afford that, because I don't like that image, that narrative.
I agree with you. The difficulty goes to, and I'll go back to, I don't know if it was a board meeting or a study session where we compared what, the capacity of a bond on the Folsom side can get you financially compared to the Rancho side. That's unfortunately the reality of the situation that we're in is there's $144 million for the elementary schools. And so the conversation has to be had of if we are trying to do something big at every single school site,
Right.
something has to give because there's not enough. You jump to the budget slide. We have a serious problem as is, like millions and millions.
Yeah,
of
we
dollars
also have
over budget.
escalation concerns in the next
Some
couple of years.
escalation concerns.
Well,
Some big escalation concerns in the
So
next
we
couple.
have to say, okay, well, if we're going to do it right, the way it should be, then something has to give at a different campus or, I don't have a good answer, but that's exactly where our team is right now.
Well, I mean,
is how do we do that?
This facility is probably one of the larger remakes, I believe, of all the elementary.
They all have significant.
Significant. Well, I'm just wondering, like, for example, this one, well, I guess if they're all significant, that takes that argument away. I was going to say, if this could hypothetically, this campus wait till 2028, 2029, when we get the district-wide bond passed, maybe the district-wide bond can supplement the funds that are earmarked for this campus to build the Folsom.
Yeah, the further you push it out, the more expensive it's gonna be, because we are fighting escalation.
Well, I'm not suggesting we're not building anything in that time period. I'm just.
No, I understand,
yeah,
I'm just saying, one of them, I mean, depending on which one you push out, we already have projects that are out in 28, 29, 30, so
Yeah.
if you're pulling one forward and you're pushing one back out, it's not changing the budget situation.
The other thing I think we need to be careful with what we think we can get accomplished with a district-wide bond, because even with a district-wide bond and the full assessment, at $60 with the AV, maybe there's going to be additional AV growth, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 million or something is what we have calculated at this point for a district-wide bond, if we were to go at the maximum amount of $60. And you have to remember, that's a couple years away, and so escalation costs on everything else. Best case scenario, you're building an elementary in the $80 million, 60, 80, when you talk about all costs, purchase, land acquisition, all the way through. You're talking first phase on high school, 200 million or so. You're talking then modernization between all of the different campuses, everything else. That money's not going to stretch as far as we would hope it would, just because, and I was saving this for later on during budget conversation, but I was debriefing with the team. They had gone to CASH, which is a conference for facilities and construction, and there's whispers of escalations in the neighborhood of 20%. And that blows out of the water pretty much our entire budget, because we anticipate 4.5%.
Yeah, so the numbers we're looking at today is 4.5% per year. And I just did after our conversation, okay, let's bump it to 6%. It takes our deficit, which is sitting at like $45 million to $80 million, just by changing it from 4.5 to 6.
Right.
So you start talking about even 1 year at 20%, it's just like mind blowing. I'm struggling with it. And honestly, that's what happened between Mangini and Alder. We had 30% escalation in 2 years, and it really destroyed everything.
We do have to be, and it's hard because we had a conversation with Keegent, our financial advisor, and we're trying to look at, could we accelerate access to funds through some kind of borrowing mechanism and then issue the bonds at a later date, and potentially that creates some savings in that it allows us to construct at a lower cost. But of course, anytime you accelerate receiving of funds, you're going to be paying more for that. There's also the current situation where they are hearing that the incoming or the current government at the federal level is looking at potentially eliminating the tax, more or less, exemption that comes with municipal bonds.
Interest rate.
If they were to do that, our interest rates would probably go up 1% to 2%, which then, of course, reduces the amount of proceeds that we can receive as well, because that would more go towards interest payments, because we're capped at the $60 threshold and all of these things. And so if that was to go into place, that changes the dynamic. So unfortunately, we're not hearing anything that makes us feel like the numbers we have are conservative. If anything, the money that we have, because again, it's static. The $144 million for R, that's a static number, right? It buys you a certain amount today. Tomorrow you get 20% less. And if we have to pay a 2% higher interest rate, that's even less, right? And so those are the things we're dealing with. But we also have to stay within the $60 threshold. So we need assessed value to continue to grow at a high enough range that we can then sell additional bonds to keep us at the $60 threshold. So these are the things that I think in the call, I actually said I think I said it out loud to the group. I said, I wish I was smarter at this, because there are so many moving pieces on this. I would love to say that we have a good solution for it, but there is risk with everything. If we were to try to accelerate issuance and use other debt service mechanisms for future bond issuances to get the money up front, we are good and all good as long as we still have that tax exemption. If the tax exemption goes away, then you don't have enough money from the bond proceeds to pay off that debt, and then it would hit the general fund. That puts you in a very precarious location, because now we're having to pay for facilities out of the general fund, and you do not want to start doing that, right? That's what could take down a school district. And so these are all the things we have to discuss, but we're looking at every conceivable scenario. We're having meetings about and that's why we're talking, we've already reduced, I think, $13 or something million from the original design work just by doing things like this. And so, but we know we still have another 30-something million, or close to 30 million to go. And so, maybe some of the district-wide bond covers some of it, but I'm gonna be honest, the district-wide bond might just cover the back shortfall because of escalation costs are higher than what we're projecting, and you end up getting nothing new out of it. That's the concern that we're having. I mean, it seems, it's kind of like medical care at this point. It seems like at some point, its system's got to give somewhere, right? Because the numbers just keep going higher and higher, but there's just unknowns with it. And, we don't know what the tariff impacts are. We know the fires in Southern California are going to have a substantial impact on materials for the next few years. So that drives cost. So there's just so many things in play right now. And in California, it's expensive to build. We have to pay prevailing wage. We have to meet a lot of code requirements. There's a lot of pieces to it that we have to make sure we're doing to meet all the requirements. So.
I mean, I guess my perspective on it is this: I would love to get this to at 100%, right? But it's clearly that's probably not going to be feasible. But even 80% is like 100% better than what they've got. So, that the classrooms for the teachers is not like really feasible for them. I mean, they work with what they have, and I super appreciate them for that. But demoing that whole building, even to get this, is still going to be such a significant improvement on that site that, I would love to have that collaborative space, but also to be able to get the other spaces for the communities that they need and things like that for that specific site. I think that's a win. So.
Yeah, I wish I had more. If we can figure something out, magic bullet or anything, we'll put it in place for sure.
We're also adding a lot more than we ever added back then. We don't have the programs that we had back then. We didn't have the TK. We didn't have as much special ed. We didn't have all the social services and mental health services, all day K. We didn't have a lot of those. So we're adding more square footage and more programs than we did years ago, which increases costs for essentially the same capacity. So those are other factors, as well as increasing cost in escalation. We're actually building more for the same amount of kids. So those are the kind of factors that we think about. Years ago, we didn't have that. So it just compounded.
We've had on again and off again conversations about whether one or two sites could potentially be shuttered in order to build a facility more in line with the size of schools that we build in Folsom. Are we no longer having that conversation? I went to the appendix and noticed that we have plans for all 10 elementary schools. So we're going to spend the money in all 10 locations and not and maintain small schools rather than having larger elementary schools similar to what we have in Folsom.
Well, we were in a place where, I think Mather Heights was our smallest school, but with the readjustment to the boundaries and the growth that we're projecting, until a new elementary is built in the Rio del Oro area, we have need for all the campuses. Unless there was interest in doubling the size of a campus or two, because these are built as smaller schools. They're just built small.
Correct.
And so unless there is interest in doubling the capacity, here's the thing. The building of a school or the closing of a school somewhere in the neighborhood of ongoing budget savings of $300,000-ish, $300,000 to $400,000 is the ongoing savings approximately. Because you still have the same number of kids and teachers, so you just have to move them. You save on the administrative costs, utilities, upkeep, maintenance, custodial, things like that, right? So it's not huge savings, in the scope of the budget of our size, right? It is definitely savings, I mind you, but the impacts that you have to do to implement such a thing is where you have to weigh the impacts of the community, the amount of time and effort to implement that, the years to close out a school. It's a multi-year process. Normally, you're doing it when you're declining enrollment. And with the Rio del Oro area and using those as Mather Heights as overflow and some of those things, that's mitigated the declining enrollment component as much for us.
At one school, but overall, Rancho Cordova is in a declining enrollment
Overall, it
status.
is. Cordova High is not. The middle schools are not. They're holding. Some of the other elementaries, I think, is it Gardens? Gardens is probably our other lower school, but we've branded that school and we're working on that to be looking like more of a Riverview type of model. So we don't know what the end results are on that. Could we consolidate and put a couple of schools of 300 together? For sure. Have we done the analysis to determine the total cost? No, we haven't done that level of due diligence. If that's something, it's a big project. It's a big project to do that analysis. And so if that's something the board wants to direct us to look at and engage in that, we can do, obviously we can do any analysis that the board asks of us. But I will also say, I've gone through a school closure, and
It's tough.
This district has
tough.
gone through school closures, and those things echo for a long time. And even though our schools are very close together, so distance-wise, it's not much of a distance increase. It's still a school that parents and grandparents went to, and so it's a big project. And if we take that on, that becomes our full-time process for about a while on that. And so if we're trying to do that along with doing all the construction for RNS and then also the work that we have to do south of Highway 50, we would need extra bodies to work through that. That's a full-time job in itself to just try to close a school.
Oh, yeah.
So we just have to prioritize where our resources and time go.
No, I give the prior board in 2010, a lot of credit when they made the decision to close Cordova Lane in Riverview at the time. Obviously, Riverview being closed allowed the district the opportunity to reimagine Riverview and reopen it several years later as Riverview STEM to outstanding success. I guess I'll just simply say I wouldn't be afraid of the conversation if I think the conversation should take place, and if ultimately it's decided that it doesn't make sense, well, that's fine. I don't think we should run away from the conversation just because it's a difficult conversation. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Yep. Other questions about Villa?
No, I think you're going to share how much price tag on those 3 orange buildings, right, in later slides? Approximate.
I don't think
I
we
don't
have the
have it
budget.
in the
Down the budget?
slides, no, but
But that's the plan. We are going to build those 3.
Yeah.
Tearing down the old one out there.
Yeah, and again, we're still working on cost control on this like all the projects. We're trying to cut as much as we can. I mean, here's the thing: when we talk about the new school design, our goal was to cut it 20%, right, and reduce cost by 20%. But you just heard escalation is going to be 20%.
Yeah.
So we're really chasing our tail on these things right now. I mean, it's not the best environment to be building and just in general. So
I can share the amounts if you want.
yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
So this, not the early scope or anything like that, but this scope that we're talking about right here is roughly $20 million.
$20 million, yeah.
As is.
And the thing that I've learned is we can get rid of glass walls. We can, get rid of some facades and things like that. But where the dollars really matter is square footage, straight square footage. And so if you want to save, you've got to, and so what you're going to see here, like you saw there, and also in our new school design is anywhere there's square footage, covered hallways, walkway areas, extra covered collaboration, those kind of things. If you can mitigate those, that's where the square footage is saved, because you can't reduce classroom sizes, because you have to, there's a standard for that, right? And so that's where savings comes from when we're trying to cut costs. I mean, we can definitely change materials and do those kind of things, and you're saving, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but to get into the millions, it's square footage. It's almost always square footage. So,
Thank you, Terry.
so here's RCE.
Yeah, so at Rancho Cordova, again, kind of looking at needs versus wants and cost, this is quite a bit different than the original visionary project where there was a brand new standalone administration building. And so what we're proposing for this scope is that the classroom wing, building B, is going to be gutted and reconfigured as the administration space. The existing admin, the finger off of the multipurpose, will become your community resource hub space. The MP was always going to be a retrofit modernization. It's sized appropriately. It has a stage. It meets generally the criteria for the size of the school. So that's going to be a renovation to bring that up. And then the library facility is currently in one classroom, and we're looking to expand that into two and renovate that into the library space. And then we will be adding in the blue an additional modular classroom wing behind building C to take the 4 classrooms from the front of the campus that we're converting into the administration and bringing them into another wing. And then to accommodate the growth of all-day kinder and TK, a 2-plex TKK modular and doing the TK play yard organization. So the original kinder and the preschool will stay in its current location.
And what was the price tag on this one? For this scope?
I knew you were gonna ask.
Since we're high on the price, right?
Yeah, so a couple of things on this site, because I know the board has specifically spoken about RCE. One of the things we commented, go ahead.
Sorry, we are in the costs, the conduit and the hallway is being addressed, as well as there is dollars in there to address the frontage facade of the backside of the multi, as well as the kinder frontage on the street. And then B wing will also have a redesign to make it not look like a classroom wing, and have an identity for the administration. I'm sorry, I missed that, but
Yeah.
that's in there.
So, and I was gonna, so when we walked there and you remember the conduit down the hallway there that feels like you're going down into a submarine? We're gonna try to open that up, right? The B wing, which is classrooms right now, the original design was where the kindergarten wing was, we were gonna blow that out, put a new admin there, move the kindergarten. I mean, we were gonna do some amazing things, right? But again, cost control on this, right? So now we're trying to do what we can to still get, a nice open front, make it so that when you walk in, it's clear you have an admin there, where that beautiful big tree is, the redwood tree. It would be facing out front. As she said, the back of that A building there, having that so that it has more of a frontage appeal to it, and the back of the kindergarten wing, trying to do something there to give it a little flair to it, to spruce it up a little bit. But we know there's also bigger fish to fry here, right? We need to make sure that we're touching the classrooms that need to be touched, and we've got some window work that we want to do as well, to try to modernize the windows, because they have those tall windows. Again, that's where we're gonna try to get standardized windows again, and some of these other things that just make it look a little dated, that give it a little update in there as well. And then we have to add the additional wing, the modular on the back that we're replacing building B, which becomes the admin, right? So that's what that new wing is there. So.
17 million. How much? 17.
And then where the current admin, I think you discussed that, but that would be where some of the hub pieces are. So it's right out there, and that way community can hit that without having to come into the campus. So we feel like flow-wise, that works pretty well. This one we went back and forth on because, I mean, it was a difference of, I don't even remember, several millions of dollars, versus, putting a new building and moving the kindergarten wing, right? Versus doing this model. So, and that's the thing is it's just like anything. If you started from nothing and showed them this, people would say, this is great. But if you show them, an upgraded version and then you go back down, then it feels like it's not quite up to the same level, and that's just how our brains work with anything. But even with this project, we're still going to have to look at ways to control cost and see if we can do some other adjustments here and there and through this project. But we've scraped this one quite a bit from what the original design layout was. So
In the plan on this particular site for where kids are gonna go while this construction's happening?
We think we have a plan without having to house students elsewhere by getting the modulars in first. The admin can stay in their current home while B Wing is renovated, as long as we get the blue additions on. You have the space for the kids on the site without interim housing.
Perfect.
again, trying to reduce costs. So, it's not as efficient to have to do it in phases like that, but it creates cost savings for us in the long run, so. Other questions on this one? We didn't give you guys the elevation designs and everything because we're still working through all of that. This is literally 2 weeks ago, I think we were.
We still had 4 options.
Yeah, Terry was moving, like copying and pasting and moving it around when we were having conversations, trying to figure out. But I mean, cost effectiveness is a driver of this conversation for sure. So, any other questions on that one? The numbers you're giving, Terry, are current dollars as well?
So these are easier. 'Cause
Those are escalated for 2 years
We're
now?
only escalating 1 year, right?
Yeah.
Of course, if things blow up tomorrow, it's not accommodated, but this is escalated dollars, so what we would
At
anticipate.
a 4.5% escalation, yeah. So if it's 20% versus 4.5, add 15% to whatever numbers she just gave you.
That is fair.
So, a couple $1 million add on, right? Just by,
Blinking.
by the time. So,
This helps us, just a ballpark number, to get
yeah,
some
give you an
ideas,
idea of
right?
what the scope is.
Yeah.
But you
Because-
can see the problem. All of the
Yeah.
elementary school sites still are hovering within, closer to current costs are hovering between, the 12 to $20 million range. But then when you take a $20 million project and escalate it out 6 years, now it's like, $30 million.
Right,
But you have 10 of them times 20, so you can see
yeah.
why we're struggling.
Yeah, you heard my rookie question last meeting. We were drawing some money, then I was asking, and I'm looking at here. I'm trying to do some math in my mind, So I think each bond, we draw $36 million last meeting. So we're
And there are conversations we'll talk about as well. When this first issuance, as we shared, we did current interest bonds only.
Yeah.
Another option is to do what are capital appreciation bonds, which more or less allow you to access more funds, but then have a larger payment on the back end, more or less like a balloon payment. There are regulations behind those now, but I know those are sensitive topics as well. So I want to make sure the board understands and the pros and cons of any of those decisions. It's kind of a scenario we were talking about yesterday when we were talking with our financial advisor, is that if you want to get the project done, you're better off to do it today than tomorrow. I think we can agree to that, right? But to do that today, that means you have to pay more in total cost, when it comes to interest and some of those things, because you're borrowing money now versus borrowing money in the future. So it goes both ways. So the taxpayer at the end of the day will end up paying more than if we did the normal process, but they'll get more. They'll get more for it. More work will get done. So you have to balance those things and be able to communicate. And it's not an easy conversation to be had, right? Because if we don't do it and we wait, and now we have a $50 million shortfall that we didn't get done in 6 years from now, and we have to go out for another bond, now we have to ask them for $50 million. If we do it now and front load it, then we only have to ask them for $30 million in the future, but they're paying for some of it now. You see what I mean? It's hard to be able to explain easily. It's a complicated conversation to be had because of the escalation costs that we're dealing with. So, and I feel like the air's gone out of the room a little bit, but realize we do still have $288 million of projects that we can do.
Yeah,
We
we
just
do.
got to keep that in mind in scope of things, right? But I always try to be very transparent with you guys on what we can and cannot do,
Sean?
and kind of the scope.
Yeah, this is construction 101. Do it today, not tomorrow. That's it, right? It's going to cost more.
Yeah.
Either in our backyards or outside public facility, it doesn't matter. Agree, thank you.
Yeah. So Cordova High.
So $144 million goes a lot further for 3 schools instead of 10. So the budget deficit isn't quite as significant on the middle school and high schools. So Cordova High is the first one to kick off for the secondary schools, and the concept has remained fairly consistent from the original concept. The idea, again, is addressing all of the need to bring programs up to date, admin space, counseling space, support space, the library, were all kind of earmarked as areas that needed attention. The fact that, administrative services have gotten split in a previous modernization, again, to provide the offices that were needed. So the idea is creating a new 2-story building in the blue, where the footprint generally is for C-Wing, where you have the administration and student services support spaces, the library, and the replacement of C-Wing classrooms in that facility. Likely, it would be admin, library, support on the first floor and classrooms on the second floor, but we haven't even gotten that far yet. The concept is based on the square footage need. It's a 2-story building, and those are the programs that would be going in it. The shape of it is still fluctuating. There's a high priority to save the grove of trees in the front, and so trying to work around that. In addition to that, the exterior windows on the existing wings will be addressed. And then we are also, it's a tiered phase, so we're starting off with a 2-story, but probably by the end of the year, early 2026, we will start on the stadium improvements of the concession building, the backside lobby on the main gym, and those components as well. So it's a two-tiered project for this, but they're going to be tracking at different times.
And when did you say that was going to happen?
Which?
The concession?
Again, it's a smaller scale project, but we're probably going to kick off that project maybe fall and carry it through into 28 instead of 27 as far as a delivery date.
Okay,
We're still
so
working on it.
it'll take a little longer to.
Well, it's a shorter duration, but there's a lot of effort needed to get the 2-story going. And
Got it.
so with the early start projects, with the press box and the stadium lights, plus the 2-story, we're just delaying the secondary piece of the concessions a little bit, just to have some manpower.
All right, thank you.
And we're gonna get a sports architect for that location, correct?
What? What'd you say?
Again, a special architect, a sports architect for that particular space?
Not really a special architect. I mean, it's not, I mean, there's, what is needed, we will get an architect for what is needed, depending on what that space is. I know we need to have more discussion about if there's other funding we can apply to that. Depending on what the scope is and what we need, we have specialty architects or engineers that we can provide for that. I know the architect we have, they do have a sports division on that as well.
Leonakis. Yeah.
On the admin building, would the main entrance in this configuration be via the parking lot on the right-hand side?
It's actually envisioned to potentially have access into the main piece on both sides, right? Because you have 2 frontages, you have the parking on the right and the parking on the left. And so being able to have presence and entrance into the admin from both is possible and is being explored.
In this configuration, none of the tall trees would be removed?
Well, that is a priority. I can't say none, but it is a priority.
If the configuration has changed somewhat to avoid as many trees as possible.
Good to hear that. So, one more time, Terry, quickly. Measure S, whatever we have, the money, $154 million. Project 1A, Project 1B, we are going to do it now, means sooner. And still the same funds are going to pay the future project, first bucket, F1, F2, and the future project F3. So it's all targeting to this Measure S funds only. Is that my understanding?
Yes.
That's
Right?
correct.
Not differing to any of those, the new bonds we are thinking in the future. Okay,
Yeah, this is all planned to be funded.
it's all planned to be on this one. Okay.
Could I just get a really quick scope of what the project's gonna be in the gym for the entryway that we're working on this coming summer?
That's just a lobby upgrade of the existing lobby within
Yeah.
the gym. That's just a refresh of that existing lobby because,
Floors, walls,
yeah,
paint?
finishes. Yep. Because
Yes.
the new lobby will be planned on the back side.
Yeah.
Face the parking lot where it kind of makes sense. So that'll eventually be in there. So this will be kind of a nice,
Yeah, I just super appreciate it because it's like, as it is now, that's where the general public is walking through and it's just not the best space. So, I mean, even for me, a temporary renovation, you know, even though that's kind of gonna be not the main entrance eventually, but
it'll be good bang for the buck.
super, yeah, it's well worth the investment on that.
I don't know if you had heard, we're also painting the gym,
Amazing.
Yeah.
Perfect.
the interior of the gym. Yeah,
So my next question on this is identity, logo branding, things like that. We've got a little bit of an identity crisis, like 75 different logos that are going on over there. Are we like working towards some kind of a brand identity? Because I'm as we're doing construction and things like that, I just want to make sure that we've got some level of consistency that's going to start happening with that.
No, that's okay, Angela, I'll jump in. So we've talked about this and I really appreciate you bringing it up now because there's more of a sense of urgency when we're talking about building a new admin building and then putting a big C on it and what that C actually looks like, because the C varies. When you say 75, I think that's what you're talking about. It's like specific to that. So I'm not exactly sure what that process is, but I would definitely like to see us convene because we'd have to get some input and do all that. But to land on something that then, and then this is Angela's world, and I think it's your world, Jen, as well, like certain color codes and all that, that we have a brand guide for Cordova High moving forward. So all the gear, all the facilities, all that aligns to that same branding. And we need to get some legacy folks in there too, because there's a lot of alumni that probably have a particular opinion about what C.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, my thing is that I just want to get that kind of started sooner than later because that's going to be a bit of a process
Yeah.
for us to do. And if we're starting construction on this, like fairly soon, within a year or so, that's going to probably be about as long as it's going to take us to get that part of it done. Thank you.
Other questions?
No, I just want to have a comment. I know this is one of our historic high school in our district, right? You know, Folsom and Vista, they are just babies in front of this high school. That wow feel, I know facilities subcommittee, probably you guys are looking into that fall. You know what? Yep, this is our high school renovation. That wow feel, I just want to put that out there. It's not the dollars I'm talking here, the appearance, the look, right?
We'll try to do wow without too much bling and glass walls. There's a middle ground. I know there's a
That's
middle
right.
ground.
One final question on the trees. You have a 90-degree angle there between, in this building. Couldn't you make the angle like 120 degrees instead of 90 degrees and protect every single tree? You don't need a 90-degree angle. You can widen that angle and protect all the trees. You got the space.
It's just schematic right now. It's
Yeah.
just two squares on
Okay,
an
all right.
aerial. There is no design yet.
So don't take it literally that that's the,
Do not take that
Okay.
literally.
All right.
Yeah, and I think you do, I mean, the redwoods have root systems that's the problem you're probably going to have is with the footings in the root system, that's what they're going to work around.
right,
But,
okay.
all right. Other questions on this one? Okay. All right, so let's talk about kind of timelines. This is a slide, I liked this slide. Terry and the team threw this one in because I think people don't realize how long it takes to actually build something, especially with all of the different things that we have to check. Now, keep in mind, this is a situation where this is an existing campus, existing school site, and we're doing design work. Add another 18 to 24 months if it's a brand new location, because you have to do all the pre-work with the land acquisition. And so when we're talking about new schools, you have to add 18 to 24 months onto this, okay? So just trying to show you why it takes two plus years to get this going. And so you can see through the work process, we're already in design phase now. And talking through that, you want to speak to any more of that?
Well, and I would just say the other comparison about a project specific like this, we're talking about one building. Where you're talking about a new campus, you're probably talking, 9, 10 times the square footage, right? So there's just an incremental scale of the quantity of design and construction documentation that goes into a new facility compared to we're doing one building on a campus. So yeah, we've just started the design process, and it's probably going to take 6 to 8 months to do the documents. They will be broken up into increments in order to try and meet the targeted bidding date of January of next year. Doing the first of the year or the end of the year in December is where you get the best pricing from the contractors, because they're starting to fill up their book of work for the year in the summer. So there's strategy there, as well as timing the construction around opening and ending of school years. So you always have to and want to target occupying in June, July of a year in order to open school. So a lot of times when we're developing schedules, we're working backwards from where we want to target. A building of this size is going to take 16 to 18 months to construct. The multi-story and just the complexity of the construction just takes a little bit longer to build. The bid period is 2 to 3 months, and then DSA, again, depends on the scale of the project, but for this size, we're estimating about 4 to 6 months to review. So once the documents are done, they are submitted to the division of the state architect, and they sit and wait for review, and then the design team picks up the comments, and then they're approved, and then you can go out to bid. So.
Any questions on that? Just trying to give you kind of high level.
No, Sean, but can we go back to page 12 really, really quick? And I totally wanted to ask about, these buildings that are coming in and on the RCE plan as far as furniture and all that good stuff. Is that included in all this, where we're going to get furniture ordered and new furniture, carpet, etc.?
For the new spaces, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, just for clarification.
And that is something to keep in mind, that this scope doesn't have us going into every classroom and modernizing every classroom. So we have to recognize that is also something, that will be lacking. It's not going to be refreshed throughout the entire campus, so.
But we are using some of the funds for that, right?
Some of the funds for the building, the new buildings, if we're adding new buildings, yes.
Yes, okay.
And remember, we are doing the facades of, the windows, and a lot of these schools have had modernizations over time, so a lot of these classrooms look really good. They're still doing it, and maintenance does a great job of keeping them up as well. So there'll be, certain things like, window refresh, so there'll be some touching of it, and like this school with the conduits and fixing all that, that'll help some of the appearance as well.
Okay, perfect.
All right. So next couple of slides, we're going to have Matt talk about leaseback. We wanted to share a little more information about this. There are different ways different methods to go forward on these kind of types of projects. And in Folsom, Cordova, we have been pretty consistent using a leaseback method. We feel like we get very good results. We see minimal change orders, and we feel like we get best bang for our buck. And so I wanted to spend a little bit with the board so that you're all getting familiar with this methodology and why we believe that this is the best procurement process for building for us as a district. So Matt's going to walk us through that.
Yeah, and as a district over the years, we've done a lot of different procurement methods. We've done hard bid, design bid build. You don't see that too much, especially in the K-12 market. It's considered more adversarial. You don't know what kind of contract you're going to get. You're not in charge of your change orders. You don't know what's coming. So, you get, sometimes it's a good project, sometimes it's not. We've done construction management. We've done construction management risk, construction management. You turn over a lot of control. You're bidding a lot of trade packages. Cost isn't really there. You're having somebody manage a project and who's managing subcontractors. We've done lease-leaseback. We find lease-leaseback as a more collaborative. Two forms of lease-leaseback that we do. We do a lease-leaseback with a bid component and a lease-leaseback with a ultimate GMP component. They're both GMP, just one comes sooner. Basically, a lease-leaseback back in the early days was considered actually a finance component, but has become a good procurement method where a district enters into a site lease to the lease-leaseback contractor, and then the district leases the site back under a facility lease. Under the facility lease, then you can do pre-construction activities, whereas a contractor then does multiple pre-construction services project I'll get into on the next page, but ultimately under the facilities lease, they do pre-construction services and they still bid the subcontractor. So you're still bidding all your subcontractors. So you're still getting the bid component as well as a collaboration component as well. What's good is that you're able to weed out subcontractors who are not pre-qualified or not able to do the job. So you're competing good subs against good subs to get a good project. The contractor ultimately constructs the project, and then he pays the project in form of tenant improvement payments. There's a tenant improvement payments, and then there's a lease at the end that is paid back. That's really the form and function of a lease-leaseback on how it is from a technical standpoint. Going to the next, guess I'll do it. Where's my wingman? At least, I said click the next page and you weren't even here.
Did you get it?
I did. I got it. These are the following steps that must be done. And it's similar to any other construction project as far as when you're bidding it out. You get a price estimate, you get a description of pre-construction services that are adopted in a RFP. The RFP is advertised in multiple locations. We do it at the building exchanges. We have quality bidders that make sure it's pre-qualified. It's on the website. It goes out into the newspaper. It's advertised twice within a 2-year period. You have all the description of the format. You have all the protocols in place. And then we publish the notice. We put that out. All subcontractors are pre-qualified. That's another requirement. So mechanical, electrical, and plumbing contractors are all pre-qualified to make sure that they're qualified to do the job. And we have a company that makes sure that they meet all the qualifications on the pre-qualification process.
Man, pre-qualified by DGS or pre-qualified by FCUSD district?
Well, it's pre-qualified by, FCUSD or a company that we have that goes through its prescribed qualification process. We're not governed by DGS because we're not a state agency. We're an agent of the state, so it's not DGS. So we have our own pre-qualification process and procedures that have to be followed. And it's part of the state guidelines as well for state-funded projects that anything in excess of $1 million through public contract code has to have a pre-qualification process.
Yeah, the requirements are in the public contracting code.
Yeah. So in the request for proposal, we prescript and outline everything that has to be required in there. We have all the criteria that needs to be considered for contractor qualifications. We specify everything that has to be included in there, insurance requirement, the safety requirements, anything else that would have to go in there, the criteria for the schedule, anything they want to input in there. Then we develop a scoring criteria weighted based on each of these qualification criteria. We specify the methodology, how we're going to rate it, indicate there'll be whether or not there will be an interview process, and the interview process after that, then everything is weighted and scored based on that specific project. And then there's a best value component for each of the contractors that is put into that. And the best value is based on experience for a specific type of job, experience on, have you done lease-leaseback? Have you done specific lease-leaseback with a kids on campus, an active campus? Have you done one over $5-10 million? Have you done a summer project? Are you experienced with DSA work? All these criteria are assigned on there, and then we rank all the proposals, and then eventually it goes to the board to award the project. Some of the advantages, next slide, of lease-leaseback is there's some control over the contractor selection. We still maintain the quality, the competitive bidding of the subcontractors. There's collaboration working with the contractor during document development. So during pre-construction, for example, one of the things we did when we had the elementary school, remember when we couldn't get HVAC units, we couldn't get switchgear, electrical switchgear. They were out almost 2 years. Under a traditional bidding method, if we did that, then the contractor would say, okay, now you're not get it for 2 years, and there's your project. Your schedule's blown, and you also don't have, you have escalation. Working with a contractor up front under pre-construction services, we're able to order this equipment earlier, even before we had subcontractors on board, to make sure that this equipment's in place in time for when the project is able to be constructed. We also work with these contractors on constructability review, which is how the building is going to be built, logistics of everything, schedule, and then value engineering is another component. We have a third-party value engineering that will also be working on this, and a contractor will also be looking at that. We're going to be pounding on them to say, how can we do this better? How can it be built differently? What kind of materials will work best? Sequencing. They'll do BIM modeling and make sure there's no clash detections on where the HVAC and all the ducting and everything goes to make sure that everything can be built properly. And also they do a cost estimating component. So if we're doing value engineering, how much is it going to save us? What's it going to cost us? And we can evaluate different components, say, well, we like these, and then we'll consider each one of these value engineering components. They can help for logistics of temporary housing, construction sequencing. Those are all things that are an advantage, especially when we're doing projects. You think about on Cordova High, an active campus, we're trying to put a building on there, moving fencing around, moving buildings around, how we're going to sequence it, where we're going to put it for the safety of the students as well. The other component is once you have a GMP, a guaranteed maximum price, you're protected by that. We know once we go into it what the price is going to be. Hard bid, you may not end up with the same contract that you started with. In most cases, we have a contingency. We actually usually get money back, although that's not the goal. The goal is to make sure that we have a good project at a fair price. Some disadvantages, there's still misunderstandings of the process, perhaps, but some contractors maybe think they don't get a fair shot, that they weren't qualified. We have many different contractors. Right now, we'll be bringing in a new contractor for Folsom High School that is somebody we haven't worked with. They're a good contractor, they have a good reputation, but they were best value for that specific job. So we're not playing favorites, we're playing the best contractor, the best price, the best thing that we can get for that specific price of that specific job. Some have said it costs higher. I think, in a hard bid project, it's pure all competitive based. You don't know until the end. I mean, how do you know? Because if you did two methods at the same time, you could compare them, but it's really hard to know which one is actually saving the best. But typically, you're going to get some cost savings and time savings, and ultimately, what you get is usually a better value for the money. I think that's the last slide on that.
Any questions?
Questions?
In a nutshell, hard bid, design bid, LLB. Is that how I'm learning?
It's not,
This
design
is-
bid is another process that is actually gaining traction in the K-12 market, which I think is good for larger projects. There's design bid build, there's CM, there's lease back. We do a lease back upfront GMP and a lease back pre-construction with a GMP, and then design build is another one. Design build was primarily used on a lot more of public agencies outside of the K-12 market because it was a little easier to do, but that's another method that I think we'll explore in the future.
Got it. Is the West Park High School in Roseville fall under that design build?
I believe that was a lease back, yeah.
Lease back?
Yeah, the high
It
school.
was lease back.
I would say probably 80%, would you guess, maybe, of all the K-12 projects are lease back in the area?
In the region, yeah, I think
region.
most districts have moved to lease back, at least for their larger projects, for sure. There's a couple districts that have tinkered with design build, but it's not a large percentage of the construction methodology locally.
You don't see design bid build or hard bid much anymore. That's pretty rare now, but.
For a bigger.
But there's been problems. I mean, time schedules, I mean, there's a couple of horror stories. But, you know, you get a good one now and then. We've had some good ones, but,
Yeah, thank you.
Matt, with the increase in tariffs, is that included in our estimates?
not yet because we don't really know the impact of that. We're hearing things.
That's part of that 20% number.
Terry and I were at the
that
same
might be-
conference and there could be, 15, 20%, 10%. It's hard to say what it will be and what products it'll be, but there's definitely going to be some sort of an impact. There's talks of recession, there's talks of a lot of things. So building materials, availability of materials. There's also a lot of people have passed bonds in the last couple of years, so there's going to be a lot of competition for the same labor, same materials, so that could actually have an impact as well.
But no, we haven't dealt with it yet. It's new news, right? Every day there's something new in the news about it.
Yeah, I mean, just mentioning like the struggle with getting some of the equipment and getting some of the materials, I foresee that being a struggle. And if we can go a route that we can get it sooner rather than later and kind of sit on the product and materials.
Well, and
That's an advantage of the lease-back contractors.
Right.
They're able to track that a lot more and help us with that.
well, I will say one thing we learned at the conference, you mentioned the switchgear that, was a consequence of, the pandemic, that we just thought was finally returning back to normal. But there's news now that pretty much all the utility companies are taking all the switchgear to the fires, and they get first priority of that equipment. And so they're not even giving timelines right now. It could be longer than 2 years to get switchgear now. So yeah, I mean, getting that information and trying to get those things, as quickly as possible is going to be critical.
I do appreciate your evaluation process. Eric and I were having a conversation about this the other day. So I appreciate that there is some level of because I don't necessarily always want a bargain basement pricing on everything either, because that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the best quality product. So I appreciate that there is some valuation to quality of service and quality of work in there, not just best and final price, because I've had plenty of times where I've gone to a factory and gotten a great price and terrible quality product. So I appreciate that kind of through this process, we're kind of balancing all of that out, because sometimes I think we get really stuck on the costs, which of course I'm all about cost savings and things like that. But at the same time too, we don't want to end up having a leaky roof or a subpar wall or something, or a weird, foundation, because we were so cost driven on everything like that we're not having that lens as well for the quality. So I kind of appreciate this process because it kind of gives you the best of all the worlds.
It's also a relationship too, because a contractor is only as good as their last job typically. And so they're going to want to make sure to do good work, because if they don't do a good job on a project, they're going to know the next time we go for a round, some of that's still going to be there. So, they want to make sure that they continue to do good work for us, and there's an incentive for that.
The only one thing probably I can put my thoughts here. I know we advertise 2 times. I know you gave the advertising process.
Right.
My thought process or my request is through CSBA or our organizations, we know who are all the districts building the high schools or middle schools in current arena. Inviting them as well, making them aware there is an opportunity here. They're already doing that. So it helps to invite the more competition, and I vote slightly high for the cost, because we have a reference checks to check, what kind of good job that vendor has done. It's not that all about the cost, but it has to have a weightage, knowing the dollars we have and how much work we are. So that's the only input I can give at this point, inviting the people who are vendors building the high schools or middle schools around our state.
And I can tell you, one of the criteria we look at is how many subcontractors they have in their pool. That's one of the things, availability, how many electrical contractors how many mechanical contractors. And when it goes to the builders exchange, there's also companies that hire people to scour everything. I mean, sometimes they'll tell me, I see you have an RFP out, and it's been like between 2 hours, and I was like, I didn't even know it hit the streets yet, and they are on top of it. So they go through the builders exchange, they go through the papers, they are scouring, and then we will talk to them, how many people do you have available, how many trades did it go? And we see all the bids, everything's open book. They send it out to, 10, 15 electrical contractors or whatever to get bids from them. So we want to make sure that we've got good coverage.
Agreed. I'm agreeing with you on that. That's what the evaluation process is, what we are going to be doing. Yep.
Any other questions? All right. So we're just going to talk a little bit of budget, high-level stuff here. You do see the bond funds. Here are the state funds when all said and done. This is how much money we would get in state matching funds. So you were asking about that, David, 36 million. So combined, we look at it as kind of one big pot for the project scopes that we're doing, about $300 million combined. So budget challenges. One of the things we're dealing with is when we can issue, we're more or less right now looking at 36 million over 3 issuances, I think is what we were looking at. 4 issuances. I should be able to do that math right. But a lot of it comes down to also, can we issue sooner so we can access the funds sooner? That comes down to a lot of the assessed value growth. So we are projecting in somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.5% assessed value growth over the life of those bonds. If the AV grows sooner or quicker at a higher level, we can then access the funds sooner. So that's something we can continue to monitor. I will say though that the SFID 4 area doesn't really have a lot of new development area. So the only way you're going to really see AV growth there is if you see sale and the new purchases that pop up that value, right? But you do have a lot of people that probably have had their homes for 30 plus years, right? So if they move on and go to another location, sell their home, you do normally see a pretty good bump in the AV on that individual house. Instead of it being $100,000 value, it's 250, 300, whatever. But you need lots of those to get in enough dollars to really make an impact there. And so that's something we're monitoring. I will tell you that the AV growth, I think Chris just told us it was under the 3.5% number for this last year. So it didn't hit the number we were hoping it would. And that's just how the market works. The other issue is the escalation costs. Again, we keep talking about that. Serious concerns about it. It really will put a damper on what we're able to do. It's just like anything. If you add a 20% cost increase on the number we're building, and you multiply it by a couple of years, it starts weighing down heavily on your ability to do the project at the same level. There's a lot of uncertainty as we've seen correction in the stock market. All the fire situation in Southern California, wildfires in Southern California. No one really knows how the tariffs will roll out and how those will impact our ability. I was interested in the fact that I heard, we read one of the things the Fed is talking about. They went from looking at potentially 1 rate cut to potentially up to 3 rate cuts because of the current economic situation, which means, potentially Fed interest rates or T-bills are going to go down. But those don't really correlate with the municipal bond market. In fact, even when there was a cut to the Fed rate, municipal bonds, the interest rates went up. So that's something to keep in mind as well, in that there's not direct correlation between the federal T-bill rates and muni rates. So something to keep in mind as well, because I was hoping maybe interest rates would at least drop for us, but that's not happening at this point. And then we also talked about the fact that there is discussion at the federal level that they might eliminate the tax exemption, which would be huge for munis. So that's something we have to consider as well. We'll know that one probably around October, because when the federal budget comes out, that's when that would come through. So we will hopefully know by October if that's going to happen, because that will definitely have an impact and a chill on the funding that we're going to be able to access, because more will have to go towards debt service versus bond proceeds for us. So some of the things we've done already. So the very first number we had was about that $57 million was the shortfall between the project scopes that we identified and the dollars we had on that previous slide. So we were closer to 360, 370, and it was at 57 million. Just in the conversations that we were talking about, just the things we've done, we've already cut 13 million out of it by some of the things like we were talking about at, was it RCE, where at no, not RCE, I'm sorry, at
Villa with
Villa,
collaboration.
with the, going with a modular versus permanent, right?
Model of the admin at Rancho.
Yeah, and the admin, changing the admin at RCE, some of those things. Those are things we're doing to try to get costs down. And once we get it to a certain level, then we'll be bringing it back to everybody and working through that. I mean, again, that's why you're not seeing, again, elevations and pieces, because we're still trying to see where we can whittle away. But as we talked about, square footage is where it's at, right? So we're trying to figure that out.
Really quick question. Does any of this funding count the $60 million for the bond that we currently have that we haven't accessed yet?
No,
So could we access that for this $57
We
million
we
shortfall
actually
at some point?
are accessing that, and we're paying that off with some of the fencing projects. Some of that will go towards us. So there's a small amount that will help towards this, yeah.
well, you're talking about, is she talking about N, the remaining? But wasn't there another one we have that we?
That is it, P.
E? Okay. So we have 60 million on that. but-
Oh, you're talking about the authorization,
Yes,
yes.
that's what she's talking.
Oh, I
So
thought
she
you were
talked about the
talking-
author, we remember, we can't access that till 2032? 2032?
So, but what I'm just saying is that, hey, if we've got those identified in 2032, the stuff that we haven't covered, we could potentially then kick that in
Yeah.
and finish up the rest of these projects.
We could definitely do that.
So not all is lost.
We'd have
No.
to sell the bonds and
Yeah.
there'd be a tax implication to it.
Well, there's already a tax rate there. So that tax falls off, and then, yes, you could just replace it back.
Yeah, so I mean, it might be just for some of the back end projects and things like that, or stuff that we haven't covered on the front end of things that we want to go back and do, that $60 million is kind of still sitting out there in the future. So I'm hopeful with that, because
Yes.
I mean, that's, if we have 57 million, okay, so maybe we have to delay it a few years, but, if some of these projects really aren't coming to fruition until 28, 29, accessing in 32, 32 isn't terrible.
That's true. It could be pretty seamless depending on the timelines.
Right.
And then, of course, we talked about the district-wide bond, but we also talked about the fact that there's a lot of needs with those dollars, and so we would have to figure out how much would be allocated. And so those are part of the conversations we'll have to have as well. Kind of next steps. So looking at that, as we talked about, we're having those facility planning meetings. We're looking at scope again, looking at budget. We're going to continue to meet. We keep meeting as a team. We also have the district comprehensive facility plan happening at the same time, trying to bring all those in. And so the value engineering is a big piece for us right now. What can we do to save money and still be able to get a product that is going to be good for the kids at the sites? And so community outreach, you can see the timeline that we talked about. And then we're moving right now, as you saw the timeline, we have to move now on the 3 schools that we've identified: Cordova High, Villa, and Rancho Cordova Elementary. We are doing also some projects like we talked about with the playground work. That's already happening. That those POs are actually going out right now. We're working on the fence projects. Actually, those contracts are coming this next meeting, I think, some of them. And then we're also doing the bathrooms and some other work at the other sites that we talked about. So I think that's kind of rounding us out to questions at this point. As I shared, we got a lot of different facility things, balls in the air. So I just wanted to share a couple other things. We have posted right now for the certificated facility education facility position coordinator. So this is going to be a principal within the district. It's a new position that we generated. The board's approved this position already. This is a more or less a principal certificated person who's going to be working with the facilities team. So they're going to be the person that will help us do the interactions with teachers and staff, help us create our ed standards. They're going to help facilitate a lot of our meetings and community outreach pieces. Going to be working with a lot of different activities. They're going to be the person, like we talked about before, when we build a new school or new design, a lot of times we were bringing a site principal in early. Instead, we will have that person help us through that process so that we can have more continuity for transition. So we're very excited about that. Those interviews are actually happening now. We'll hopefully here soon we'll have a appointment and bring a name forward to you. So we have that going. We've created a couple additional facility support positions that we're adding, someone to help with purchasing and procurement, someone to help with contracts and all of our systems on that, just because you can see the scope we have. We have all of this, plus what we have down in SFID 3, plus if we pass a district-wide bond, then we'll have projects going every which way. So we're trying to build up for capacity of this. We are very unique. I will tell you, I honestly, of a district of our size, the fact that we do so much in-house, that we don't use construction management firms, that we don't use firms to do our developer fee justifications, that's just a testament to the team that Matt, Jerry, Joanne, all of them, Mike, Chris, who else am I missing? Susan, Ariel, the entire team, Bonovich, all of his team. It's just really a recognition. I was the director of facilities, whatever you want to call it, in my districts before, and I had to hire people galore. And this team, with the same amount of folks, is doing a district 20 times my size, right? So it's just a testament to the work that this team has done and years of experience. And Terry, all of her support, bringing Terry on has been huge for us. All these presentations you've seen the last few times have all been Terry generating a majority of that content for us. So we really appreciate her work. But we have a really great team. And so I just want to recognize that and the work that we're doing with regards to I know I can sleep at night knowing the fact that we're doing what we can that's best for kids, for facilities, and we're maximizing dollars for taxpayers as well. So I know those things are happening. I know there are one-offs with regards to glass walls and other things that occurred, but I dare to walk as many schools that we have and the programs that we have and see if anybody can muster up to our level for what we've done in-house and what we do as a team. So just wanted to recognize all of the team and thank them for all their efforts on all of that. So, but one of the big things that we're doing is we're bringing you all the information. We're giving you all the details because at the end of the day, you're the board that has to decide these things and face the community and the decision-making that we're going forward. So we're gonna hand it to you all on the platter, and then we're gonna have a conversation about how we want to move forward on these things. So the next conversation after RNS here is going to be April. We're going to really look at design and get recommendations for the board on what does the next elementary school look like. This is going to be more than the board has had in the past, I think, in that you're really going to look at the designs. We've gotten it down. We're not going to bring you 12. We're going to bring you 2 because we really did deep dive analysis of those and did comparisons of all of the options, all availability based off of the information we got from our committee. We had a Measure M committee, if you remember, our SFID 3 committee, and we had 2 board members on that, and we talked about what were the priorities on kind of the elementary design, but understanding we still need to cut cost. And so we will have some designs for you guys to look at the next meeting and talk about that as well. So we got a couple balls in the air, just a few, but I think we're going in a good direction. So Terry, you want to answer some?
I just want to add one more thing. If you notice, you're at page 24 of 36.
Oh,
the
yeah.
rest of the plans for the projects are in the appendix. If you want to take a look, we just thought it was too much to go through all of them, but they are included in the.
Yeah, and so, every site has a scope of projects, and you can see the blues, which are the new buildings that potentially, these are high-level concepts, though. We have not gone through and done the same level of work that we have on the first 3.
Correct. This is definitely a work in progress.
Yeah.
It's not my own.
And so we're hoping maybe from all, if we can whittle on some of these, we can shave a couple million here, a couple million there, continue to work on it. But, we'll keep the good fight, but we also know we're fighting an uphill battle with escalation of cost and just time slipping away on us as well. So, but we did put those in there. I appreciate that. Thank you.
We've already noticed some efficiencies that we've been able to capture in some of those just by going through them at high level as well.
So.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sean, Matt, and Terry, Jerry. Appreciate the presentation that you had. And it's just kind of funny. I mean, there's a lot of questions that are still out there that need to be answered. And I know between a couple of my colleagues on the dais, we were, kind of discussing what about this, what about that. And I'm pretty sure those ideas will come up soon. But like you said, I know there's a lot of balls in the air right now, but this study session was important, I think, to bring knowledge to this board on what direction we're headed in to make sure that our schools are up, you know, that they're a jewel in the community and people would want to go there. I mean, there was some discussions about Cordova Gardens, which is now a STEAM academy, and how we need to bolster that and market that. And once we do the modifications on it and you know, build it up, it's going to be something that parents want to send their kids to. I'm open to any final comments from the board. YK?
YK, absolutely. I know that $44 million shortfall is based on the escalation 4.5%. Right? I just want to put that out there. I just did this simple math. If it is 20%, shortfall is going to be close to 100 grand. Right? Thank you again. This is awesome. The only comment I can make again, this is my 3rd month on the board. I have been very active in the community, attending the meetings. Most of our meetings are staff heavy, very less community engagement. That's the only reason I made my point to my colleagues. I totally understand administrators and teachers has to give a heavy inputs to our facilities. 66% majority on the R&S by the voters. They are the ones approved. We got to have their voice heard clearly through this process. That's the only reason I was making my points. Please don't take me wrong, because that's what I see on the other side of the coin. And we got to be creative on inviting those people who are the voice of the community and be part of this process. I think that's the only comment I can give. As we go through, I think I'll be focusing more. Sean, I think you gave April for a new elementary school for this purpose. This may be sometimes in June, July, we may get some more updates on the R&S, right? Not right away.
Yeah. Our goal here is to hopefully start embedding some of these updates in our regular meetings versus having study sessions. But this one was, this is a pretty big lift. So as you'll see in April, we're going to try to keep it to under an hour, hopefully, and just kind of give updates and kind of where we're going, unless we have a deep dive where we need to have a specific. I think the last meeting, the board asked for a conversation about SFID 3, specifically the next school on the Rancho Cordova side. And that piece, that's probably going to be a study session. We're going to be putting out a date for that one because that's going to be a deeper dive. But these meetings are probably, I would say probably every other month or so. We're probably going to have some level of facility updates just because of all the moving parts we have, because we need at least guidance from the board, right? And discussion is sufficient for us to get direction of what we need to go. We don't need action items, so a lot of times we can just fit that in, hopefully in regular meetings. So,
yeah, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board?
Yes. First of all, thank you to the staff and consultants who put this together. A lot of work was put into this, and I very much do appreciate it. There's a lot here and a lot to think about. I mean, part of me wonders if the board could have a couple of weeks to just digest everything that you just presented. And if we couldn't have, like we did prior to the last meeting, revisit this as a study right before a board meeting. This, for 15 years, back when I was active with the Rancho Cordova Chamber of Commerce and we were talking about facilities, what we were envisioning is not here. back when I ran in 2018, what I guess had been envisioning for Rancho Cordova is not here. What I've been speaking at the dais for the last 6 years about Rancho Cordova facilities is not here. And, I guess part of me, I guess I just need to, I guess I need to think about, do I just stop advocating for what I was thinking for the last 15 years and just say, well, this is it. This is what we can do. I have a mixture of feelings right now. Part of it, I'm just sad. And maybe it's just something I just need to get over. I just need to think more about what this whole presentation was. Again, I don't take any of my comments as a reflection on the quality of this presentation. I think it was great. Thank you. And, obviously, money doesn't go as far as it used to. Anyway, those are just my comments. I do have one last question, however. Cordova Lane has 20 classrooms. 10 of the classrooms are not being used for anything student-related. It's for storage. A couple of them have a single desk in it where a single person's working out of the space. Might we be able to reclaim those 10 classrooms so that we can move students who, we can stage the facilities like at Rancho Cordova Elementary, move those classes over to Cordova Lane while construction's taking place. Maybe we can do the same thing with Cordova Villa, because, we certainly, 3 of the classrooms are just storing instruments. Heck, we can find some other place to store instruments and use a classroom for a classroom.
My first thought with that, and I might be misspeaking, is that there's not an administration on site there, where there is in other elementary schools in which you would move. So you would have to staff some sort of administration.
They do have something there. I don't know if you call them
There's
a
not.
principal, but there is a site. Isn't it a principal?
So Jackie's there, who is
Yeah.
our coordinator over preschool programs.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure, are you saying for the temporary housing situation for
For
Villa?
temporary housing, so we can at least save the money from having to buy portables.
Yeah, well, I think we can do that without having to use the Cordova Lane. I think we can put them at Mather Heights or Navigate. We can figure out another combination that's closer to where Villa would be located to make that work, I think.
Yeah.
So I think we have the ability for that. I will tell you that I have to speak on behalf of Mindy, who is our VAPA coordinator, and she would tell me that those instruments have to be in a conditioned room because they will get damaged if we were put them in a sea container. And believe it or not, storage is a huge issue for us in the district. We actually, years ago, we were supposed to build a warehouse and some other things and maintenance yard, and we just don't have space, to be honest, and we're growing. So there just seems to be more and more. And with VAPA expanding with the Prop 28 money, we actually are buying more instruments. She's actually asked for a couple more extra classrooms for all of the work that you won't believe how much space tubas take up. It's a lot. So, but I appreciate what you're saying. Yes, I think we do have a place identified on that. So,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
I guess my comment's actually to Mr. Reed. Is your concern that maybe we don't have full scope on kind of what's happening at each of the locations as far as the buckets of money? And that maybe you're thinking of reallocating some from some sites over to some of the other sites to get a full scope of what you're thinking?
Yeah, even if we're keeping all 10 elementary school sites, and that's the decision, great. All right, we're going to keep all 10 elementary school sites. But, one of the things that I've been advocating for is one campus at a time, as money allows, that we bring the entire campus down and we build a Folsom campus in Rancho Cordova. starting with the oldest facility that's 65, 67 years old or whatever. And I just feel like we're spreading the dollars so far and so thin that it's to make sure that everybody says we got something, that we really don't accomplish anything of grand outcome. I mean, obviously, we're accomplishing something, but I guess the question that I posed from this dais at least 4 or 5 times, are we going to be celebrating Rancho Cordova Elementary School's 110th anniversary with the original buildings, is going to be yes, albeit renovated. Where my vision was we raise the campus and build brand new. Now, obviously, you can't do all 10 campuses. Well, you wouldn't do that with Navigator anyway, because that's a newer campus. But but you can't do that with the 144 million, clearly. I guess I'm kind of curious to hear about the new elementary school model that the staff is going to present to us, what the cost of that is, what the design is like. Because if we're going to be building that model in Folsom, why not build that model on a campus site in Rancho Cordova? I really want to uplift Rancho Cordova and the facilities. I just don't know if what I saw, again, if this makes everybody else happy, then I just need to get over it. This is not what I had envisioned in 15 years of talking about this. So
I think reflecting in all of the conversations we've had about RNS, there was a consensus over renovating, not tearing down and rebuilding. And I know that there was a very clear conversation and there was a lot of public comment, and it did feel like the community and everybody on the dais was in favor of everybody getting a slice of the pie. And so what I saw was actually more than kind of face value improvements, where in the previous meeting, I did feel like, okay, we're kind of putting a Band-Aid on it and making it pretty from the outside, but are we really getting the improvements on the inside? Whereas as this presentation, especially with the first 3 sites, feels like it's more than a Band-Aid. We are potentially tearing down some buildings and rebuilding where we need to, and renovating. And I think from my perspective, this was actually more than what I expected to see in terms of where our conversations have gone in the past. And I thought there was a very clear direction of not tearing down and rebuilding and working towards renovating all of the sites. So this is what more than what I expected to see, because just a pretty front wasn't necessarily improving an educational opportunity for kids. And I feel like this is, so.
Just to clarify, they weren't just pretty fronts. All of the stuff that we presented today were a component of.
Totally. And just our images. And that was my question back then too, was what is it? And agreed that like even an admin space is a fantastic thing, but how are we improving our education for our kids? And I think that that's what I saw more of today than what I saw previously. So yes, I know that. So.
Maybe Jen, you have to help us when the communicating to voters. What did we say with this, for this money? Maybe you are maybe very close to that. Help us here.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all, if we had more money, we would love to do everything that we have. I think that we're dealing with reality of dollars. And I think that if we're looking at scale, and if an elementary school is going to be somewhere in the cost of even $50 million, that's going to be tough for us to get to where we need. It's the unfortunate part about it is that we built a lot of schools kind of around the same time. So, it wasn't like, we had kind of a scalable, 10 or 15 years in between a lot of these schools, right? So, I mean, Cordovaville, in my mind, getting rid of the spaceships is practically a tear down of that location. I mean, that is going to be a massive improvement for that entire block, that whole area. I think will continue to improve, from a whole neighborhood perspective of it. And I think that, that's what we committed to when we were walking to voters, is that we committed to that everyone was going to get a slice of the pie, So I think that it's really hard. And if we had $50 million for every site times 10, and we had $500 million that we could do, I think we would all agree that we would, on some of the locations, the tear down would be appropriate. But I'm just not sure that that's where we're going to get to with dollar wise. But, I think to Kara's point, what we presented to the public was a lot of facade work and things like that. And I think what we got tonight was more the meat and potatoes of what was kind of the internal perspectives of things. I am happy to see administration start to collaborate more. At Rancho Cordova Elementary, we've got the AP on one side of the campus and the principal on another side of campus. It's probably for them very challenging to be able to do their work. And same thing at Cordova High. as a parent, I rolled up there the first time and walked in the counseling office, having no idea. So I think from a community perspective on that site with the two big projects that we have going on there, I think is going to be such a massive uplift. The library is just, it's not that the building is a problem, it's that the site is too small and not conducive to the size of the student body. So, and that's kind of what we're really dealing with. So, the site itself is not what the problem is, it's the scalable size of the school now. So, of course, I'm a proponent that, go big or go home, but I'm also a realist in looking at the numbers and things like that. And, hopefully we can get other bonds. I'm also a realist, though, with other bonds of what that's going to look like when we have to build high schools and we have to build middle schools and we have to build more elementary schools. And even going for district-wide bond, the slice of that pie for what's going to be left over here is going to be very thin. So I don't want to overpromise and under-deliver either, and I think that we have to be very conscious about that. And what we did talk to the public about was that every site was going to get something, whether it's at Navigator, a new shade structure, even a new shade structure at Navigator and some new playground equipment would be a very big improvement. The paint this last summer over there was a very big improvement for that site. So, that's where I'm at with it. Of course, I would love to do more, but it's just what the dollars tell us that we can do, right? So hopefully we'll have some of that bond money that we can kick in 2030, whatever it is. And, we can go back and continue to work on some of the other project scopes that we have. And, hopefully our community will come together and we can get that bond passed. And I think that's going to be passing that bond isn't going to be one board member engaging in that. It's going to be all five of us having to heavy uplift that, because that's going to be some work and that's going to be a lot of walking. So everyone tie on their shoes. So, because we got to get it. So that's kind of where I'm at.
All right, great.
Board President, can I say a few things so you can have the last word?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, Trustee Reed, as well as folks on dais, I am confident that the look and the feel of these schools beyond the work that is going to be done is going to it's going to be different. There's definitely the facade work, the aesthetics, the curb appeal, which helps home values, as well as the functionality within the classrooms. And one of the things that was said in this presentation that I've realized in my first year walking through all the schools is there actually has been ongoing through Bono's team. You're walking into classrooms in a 60-year-old school, and there is new cabinetry, there's new finishes in those schools. So the interior of a lot of our classrooms, not all of them across all schools, but a lot of them are already done. So actually what the kid experiences for 6 hours of his or her day actually feels new. So I want to assure that, and I also want to assure that we are moving towards, and we're not quite there yet, but district-wide standards for furniture, district-wide standards for technology, that's already in place. So the inside, the guts of a classroom across our district are the same, which assures equal access to curriculum, equal access to rigor. All of those things are in place for the student's experience. So I wanted to assure that. And of course, all of our elementary classrooms are a certain size, middle school and high school classrooms are a certain size. And then of course, across the contract, The same amount roughly of students are in those classrooms across the district. So I think a lot of what you're feeling, and I think about this as I think about homes, and not to minimize, but you go to an old suburban neighborhood, the homes are simply older, and some of the things, the architecture is different than them, versus if you go to a new home, the new development, there's the homes, they look different. And some things have been updated over time with technology and those things. But we are assuring that in our older schools, those renovations are making sure that all the insides of the schools are equal for all of our students in the experience. And I'll circle back and I'll close this again, because at some point Sean said, feel like, it's kind of the air's out of the room, I think was his. Well, balancing, this was the meat and potatoes, almost the vegetables, right? And so it's like we need to do these things for our student experience, but these schools are going to be beautiful. The facade stuff is still present. We are doing things that when you walk the RCE campus and you're putting all that conduit up above and hiding it, just that is an aesthetic. It's going to feel. But no, they aren't new construction, right? Because it's an older neighborhood. And our newer schools are built in newer neighborhoods because those are schools that are based on need for new enrollment. We aren't leveling schools anywhere that exist in neighborhoods and building new schools because the current school isn't able to be renovated, if that makes sense. I don't believe we've done that in our past.
No, we haven't. Other neighboring districts have, though.
Eric, I have a quick question, follow up to what you just said, because I feel like there was two different things said. I heard earlier, no, not all classrooms will get new furniture. And you just said there is.
We're moving towards a classroom standard, that new position, that
Okay.
every classroom will have this teacher desk and these desks.
Okay.
And we're looking for, we're working towards, what's the proper word? I'm not going to put Jim on the spot, but the ability for students, especially in our elementary schools, like multiple modalities, so you can stand and learn, you can sit and learn, you can squat and learn, like all those kinds of things. So I've seen our classrooms have different varying size desks at different heights. We're moving towards that standard. We're not quite there yet. The new principal that's heading into that is going to be working on doing that as well. We're getting new furniture in the new buildings. That's what one thing, I think was the question, was the cost of the new furniture. We had a new building, we're going to put new furniture in it. Yes, David. Did I answer? You had one more.
I feel like
And
that
then
was
team chime in if I missed
I
something.
feel like that was like a circle around answer.
Oh,
So
you want me to
we're moving towards it, but if we are completing the construction, say at Rancho Cordova Elementary, and some of those buildings are getting new furniture, part of their new build, are we also replacing the old furniture in the new buildings to be that uniform furniture across? Because I do believe in Folsom, when the schools had the remodel, and I might be wrong, but when there was some old building, some new building, all classrooms received the new universal furniture, which also as a teacher who moved around classrooms and like, oh, I need one extra desk,
It's a great question.
4 extra chairs, and it's different from one room to the other. I personally was like, I have to have my desks the same height and the same color chairs. Like, it was just
Yep.
me. But, if you have different furniture throughout the school, that becomes difficult.
Yeah.
So
the question that was asked and answered, and then I'll get the answer to the second part here. I'm going to look to the team. The first question was the cost of the new furniture included in that? And that answer was yes.
Okay.
So the second question, and I'm looking to the team, when we renovate a school, do we bring in all new furniture that matches the furniture that we're putting in the new?
I'll let Jerry
buildings?
chime in as well, but I know in the bond in Folsom, part of it was all new furniture throughout, even if all wings weren't touched, new furniture was put in those wings.
But the question is if that's a priority that we would want to do, we would need to adjust our budget to make that work. But it sounds like if
I can
that's-
say that is a priority, and that's why I had asked that question earlier in the meeting, if it was included in the bond. That's where I was going with that.
You can add $10 million to the budget deficit to solve.
But if that's the
Effective.
priority the board
It's-
No, I
wants.
understand.
we'll-
I'm
But
just
that is a
saying.
priority,
Yeah,
though. I mean,
absolutely.
it doesn't make any sense to rebuild and put all the stuff in, but you still have the same carpet, the same desk, and all that other stuff. And
Right,
the
but there
furniture is
are-
not included.
So to clarify, the current scope, if there's something we are touching and it's new, we are furnishing it. But if we
Okay.
are not touching the insides of a classroom, just the windows, we were not furnishing.
But I think if
And
the
it is an
standard was,
incon-
we did that in Folsom, we would do that here. So I think we will adjust our budget accordingly for
We
it.
have to also look, because we did modernizations at certain points in Rancho Cordova, and they got new furniture of that too, so we have to be judicious on making sure that we're not going to a spot we just did it. A lot of them are up for new, so, and as we go through projects and the timeline, there's probably will be up for furniture, but, we'll look at that and we can adjust.
We will
accordingly.
make sure that the standard is met across the district. David, I would like to share that the campuses that, the school districts that are tearing down whole campuses and building them are districts that do not have SFIDs. They're district-wide bonds. They're also not districts that have new construction with those bond dollars. So they're going out for a $500 million bond, but all of it is for modernization. So they have a larger pot to work with that we don't have because of how SFIDs have divvied up the allocations between our campuses. And so that's one of the reasons why they have access to more dollars than we do in some of that station.
And
Yeah,
the condition of the facilities were also not maintained to a level that where they were in such poor shape.
We're not going to comment on that, but we're going to say that we maintain our facilities at such a level that
Oh, we do. I agree with that, yeah. But I actually do stand somewhat corrected. I realize I misspoke when I said our neighboring districts have brought their facilities down and rebuilt. I would technically say we have as well, not 100%, and granted that we're talking about campuses that were built with portables. But if you look at Carl Sundal, Oak Chan, and Folsom Hills, we brought everything down to the ground except for the multi and the administrative building and
Not
rebuilt.
Folsom Hills.
Not
Folsom Hills had permanent classrooms and they had some portables and they were brought back with modulars. Oak Chan and Sundal had all portables that were brought down and brought with permanent wings in the library. The administration and multipurpose were just modernized. They were not raised down.
Okay, well, all right, then at least two schools. And I look at what we did at Sutter Middle School, where we demolished the old admin building, the old cafeteria, and built a two-story classroom, library, and new administrative building, and new a multi-purpose with a stage. I don't know. It's obviously we have a lot of older campuses. I get it. And
Let's not forget
yeah.
Cordova High, where we built a new auxiliary gym.
Oh, yeah.
We
Yep.
tore down classrooms, built a new two-story
Yep.
state-of-the-art science wing. We built a new performing arts theater.
Yep.
We've built a lot of new facilities there as well. So,
Yeah, beautiful
I mean, it
campus.
is, and we've raised some others. We built, Cordova Villa. We demolished an old multi, built a new multi there. Classroom complex at RCE. I mean, there has been some things that probably just hasn't been noticed as much, but it has happened throughout. I mean, not to the same extent, but it has happened.
And again, I think a big piece of it is if we could take the amount, the 144 million, and take it to 15 years ago, we could do a lot more. That's the other big piece of it is as we talked about, that I use this example a lot. You buy a dozen eggs today, it's not the same cost as a dozen eggs 15 years ago, right?
And I told you not to use the egg example, but he did. I would just say also too, I think we've talked a little bit about SFIDs, and it's just bonding capacity, right, on assessed value, right? I mean, that's just reality. Is like we could only do $60. That's our limit. So that's 144 million based on assessed value. So yeah, and that's, I think we've talked about it and mentioned here, is a district-wide bond when the assessed value, and we look at neighboring districts like Elk Grove and San Juan who are able to do that, is in one district, and that we're spreading the resources across, and they're benefiting where the most need is, but also knowing that when you're benefiting where some need is, you're maybe alleviating some impacts of enrollment in other spaces. And so I think a lot of this, David, is about how do we talk about one, and I think that district-wide bond really helps with that, because within the SFIDs, we're saying that it's just for that, and then it becomes almost, and this is a word that was used, like almost like tribal, like that's our money for our, and that then creates this dynamic that we see sort of replaying itself out in the larger community. And we have 22,500 kids, right, and 37 schools that this governance team is here to serve and to the best of our ability. And yet some of the structures, the architecture in our district based on past decisions prevents us from doing that currently. But we have the power to potentially shift that narrative based on our work and based on like a district on other things. Like we've been talking about it having a, the name is escaping me. Angela, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Having a, it's late. Where the community's coming together, we're doing fundraising, and we have a foundation. Oh my gosh, on camera, hi. Just a foundation to really start to talk about our district as one district. Even more, because I know that's happening. And you guys are going to see when you hear the students speak on our facilities master plan video, and you hear Van and Mia talk about their district experience and talk about how beautiful our communities are together, and how Van, who has lived in both, and how that's shaped him, you will have such pride that we are the governance team of one district, of the Folsom Cordova Unified School District. And so
I've seen that video.
have you seen it?
It's amazing.
The kids steal the show. Like, it's unbelievable. Yeah. I'm so proud of the work that our teachers and our community has done in raising them. So, yeah. So that's my
Tell
soapbox.
a really funny story about being a board member. President Clark was there, so he heard this. So the other day I was at a meeting and we were chatting and he was like, "What district are you?" And I was like, "I don't know, Folsom Cordova." And he was like, "No, like what district do you cover?" And I was like, "I forgot." Like that was I needed that during campaigning, but I'm responsible for 22,000 kids. That's the way it is. And so I definitely got called out for it, but I do think that that's how our board is functioning. And so I appreciate it. And he followed up with the same thought, was that our board has come together and representing our entire district. So
It's funny, I can't tell you my number either.
okay, well, there you go.
2, 3, 3,
More the SFID.
3, 4,
So.
3. I'm 3, okay. Yeah. I know the
Good
boundaries,
Lord.
I just don't know the
No,
number.
really? All right. Yeah, let me go ahead. Again, I just want to thank the staff for answering our questions. I can guarantee you there will be more coming down the pipe, and I appreciate the fact that we had taken the time out today to sit through this study session and look at those renderings, and the ideas and thoughts that you may change. But I hope the board can agree with me that this is a priority, and the Rancho Cordova schools deserve this. So I think we're heading in the right direction. Hopefully those questions about the furniture and all that stuff can be further explained. But I just appreciate the fact that we are all here and able to discuss our plans moving forward and what we can do for our Rancho Cordova schools. Again, it's a priority to me, and I know Board Member Reed is passionate, along with everybody else being passionate about our schools in Rancho Cordova and how we can bring it up to standard and make Rancho Cordova a talking point in the city, in this county. So with that being said, if there's anything else for the good of the order, if not, then meeting adjourned.